Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Kyuubi gives Naruto his power during the Mizuki incident part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. This day had started out well enough for all involved. Children had their school, and more importantly, their final exams. The teachers especially were celebrating as it would be Sasuke's last day, and that meant one thing, and one thing only. No more fangirls. For Iruka Yamino, the day had rapidly taken a dive as his favorite student, one Naruto Uzumaki, had had trouble right out of the gate. He knew the young man had been studying hard, he'd seen him at night, sitting up in bed, poring over books while balancing things on his head and running through hand signs so fast that even the veteran, at least for a ninja teacher, had been left wide-eyed. But then why was it that the boy had been doing so poorly in class all these years? You see, Naruto had been held back 2 years already, having failed out both times for reasons that Iruka, upon seeing the kid's training regime, couldn't understand. He had ground himself into the dirt doing physical training in the form of his pranks, outrunning even the most seasoned of the ninja force with relative ease. Only the vaulted dolphin, former head of the Anbu tracking corps, had been able to catch him with any measure of regularity. Iruka was no fool, he suspected some part of the teen's burden had been helping him in that regard, whether or not that was due to something he knew about or it was utterly unconscious none could tell. When he would ask the Hokage about it, the elderly leader would simply smile and chuckle at the boy's latest escapade, then ask to see the blonde bundle of energy privately for a time. If anything, the next prank would be that much more grand, as though his commander had been asking the boy to try and test his forces, and he had to admit, after seeing a few of the animal-masked Black Ops warriors huffing and puffing, he couldn't blame him. Still, the results of this morning's tests had made so little sense it made him want to question his own skills as a teacher. It was almost as though Naruto had been looking at entirely different questions on the written. The second Hokage's bloodline ability was wood. Iruka knew that Naruto knew better than that. There wasn't a student in the whole of the academy that knew more about the cages, be them foreign or domestic, than Naruto. Now, Iruka was sitting in one of the many bars in Konoha, nursing a bit of rice wine, his own heart breaking at what he had to do to someone he considered to be a little brother. None of this was adding up, and right now he was screwing up the courage to try and talk to the Hokage about these scores. That's where his evening took a dive. Just as he was about to let the cool liquor slide past his lips, he felt the hairs on the back of his neck tingle, the tall tale sign of someone about to arrive via Shunshin. Not sparing the Anbu a look waited for the eventual order to come, Iruka Yamino. HRN. The Hokage requests your presence at the tower to join the search. This caught his attention, and what, pray tell, would the Hokage need with a washed-up Anbu? Naruto Uzumaki has stolen the forbidden scroll. Iruka didn't feel the glass slip from his fingers, but the resulting crash was more than enough to spur him into action. Before the cat-masked Anbu could so much as blink, the academy teacher had vanished. No smoke, no wind, he was simply gone. Iruka Yamino, a young and currently rather bloody Chunin of Konoha, was looking at his one-time best friend and barely contained horror. No, Mizuki. You mustn't. With a grin that would have even Orochimaru quaking, the academy professor turned traitor took a deep breath. He was going to enjoy this. You're the nine-tailed fox. Iruka watched in horror as Naruto looked from his one teacher to another, still clutching the scroll to his chest, as he did his best to process what it was he was hearing. He was the fox. That's absurd, but still all the stares, the harsh mutterings, the beatings. Could it be true? The blonde boy turned to his sensei with a questioning look to see tears in his mentor's eyes. Iruka-sensei. No, Naruto. It's not true, don't believe him. A sadistic laugh echoed through the empty forest as the silver-haired Chunin drew a shockingly large shuriken before, with a flick of his wrist, the sharpened steel began to spin with the fury of a mill's saw blade. He's lying to you. They all are. They hate you and have been doing everything they can to end you from the beginning. Ever wonder why you can never buy food? Ever wonder why you are tied and beaten? Ever wonder why you fail every test? Iruka felt his heart tighten with every word, even as Naruto's eyes narrowed, a glare dancing between the two before he looked to the Hokage monument, specifically at the stone edifice of the third. There his eyes softened before looking back at Mizuki. You lying. There's no way the old man would lie to me. If anything, the man's laughter became even more pronounced. You fool. Who do you think ordered it? Naruto flinched as though he had been struck, memories of him asking the Hokage time and again why he was hated, who his parents were, did he have any other family, all met with a sad smile, a far-off look, and a shake of his head. But there's no way. The fourth killed it. Yes. He did kill it. The very night you were born. Or maybe I should say, reborn. The laughter only continued as Iruka tried to get his feet, pulling a kunai from his leg as he tried to pull himself to Naruto. Naruto, don't listen to him. He's trying to trick you again, he's trying to steal the scroll. Ignoring the struggling teacher, he took careful aim at the teen who was supporting himself on the large scroll as his legs had turned to rubber with a world-shattering revelation. However, the weakness was starting to fade as anger filled him. Was Mizuki telling the truth? If so, then everything made sense. As his anger spiked, his mind running through every encounter with every villager, his failed attempts to make friends Sakura Sasuke, the bad food, the loneliness, his chakra flared. The two teachers looked on in surprise as his power became something visible, something that normally only jonin were typically capable of. The clearing lit in pale blue as it kept flaring, then as his eyes turned back to Iruka it changed. Blue became a deep purple as the thought of someone he cared for so much had betrayed him. However, he saw how Mizuki had attacked him, and that laugh he was no friend either. Purple began to lighten once more to a deep red as he turned now slid eyes on Mizuki. He felt the power coursing through him. He wanted to be strong, never to lose against this team in a battle again. Naruto was no fool. He knew that every time he came time to spar that Mizuki would go that much harder on him, almost letting Sasuke win while he was utterly destroyed in the fight. Never again. That's it, Naruto-kun, that's what you need. Never give up, fight. Win. Prove yourself. Wide red eyes glanced around small clearing for a moment, wildly searching for the owner of the voice. It was a strange, oddly alluring thing, but it was faint, as though it was coming from deep in a well. Who are you? The friend Naruto-kun, the silver one, only speaks shades of truth. Trust your heart. In all the years he had dealt with people, all he had met, only one had sounded like this before. The third Hokage, his Ajiji. Naruto looked again to Iruka to see the anguish in his eyes, the pure desire for him not to believe Mizuki, and smiled. Said ex-sensei's eyes narrowed before rearing back and letting the shuriken fly. Die, demon. Die and let us be rid of you forever. The world seemed to slow for Naruto as he turned, the too familiar sound of steel cutting through the air. As a reflex he started to draw up his arms to cross before his body, his eyes screwing shut in anticipation of pain that never came. Confused eyes stared into the dark of night up into the tear-streaked face of Iruka. Iruka-sensei. I'm sorry Naruto, I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you. I saw the way you were hurting, but I just couldn't. Don't believe him. Naruto, you need to take the scroll. Iruka's face seemed to swell for a moment before he coughed up a gout of blood, spattering Naruto with a warm fluid, even as tears dripped onto the gaping boy's face. Take the scroll and go, I'll hold him off. No buts, let your sensei show you how it's done. Naruto felt a tear of his own slip down his cheek as Iruka reached back and pulled the large blade from his back, and with a motion that one so injured shouldn't be capable of spun hard and returned it to Mizuki, who gave a lazy sidestep. Come now Iruka, you know as well as I that you are no match for me. I've beaten you in every test, every trial. I've been a Chunin 2 years longer than you, there's no way that you will be able to stop me. Iruka gave a mirthless laugh as he pulled another set of blades from his body, the spurt of blood giving Mizuki another smile. Mizuki, there is one small thing that you're forgetting. Oh? And that is? Being a ninja is all about deception. Mizuki's eyes widened as Iruka vanished from view before cursing and taking off himself. There were currently two possibilities. 1, Iruka was going for help, or 2, he was going to set up an attack. Either way, he had a kid to find. Naruto was currently crouched behind a large stump, his hand sealed firmly over his mouth in an attempt to keep his breath all the more quiet. The young man racking his brain to try and figure out what to do should his former teacher find him again. Oh well, that's simple enough. Who are you? Where are you? He could almost feel the voice's smile. Come, Naruto-kun, come find me. Before he could ask what the voice meant, Naruto felt the dark of night seem to intensify on him, close in, then a feeling as though he were falling. When he next opened his eyes he found himself staring up at a dark, stone-lined ceiling, several inches of his prone body covered in faded water. Slowly the young teen pulled himself up to his feet, wincing at the scent that now coated him. Hello? Silence. He cast nervous eyes along. Please? Is anyone there? Naruto couldn't be sure, but he thought he heard a whisper far up ahead. Latching onto that he picked up the pace, stumbling every few paces as the corridor began to brighten. Rounding a corner the blonde skid to a halt, almost falling as his feet caught at the uneven cobblestones. There, before the confused teen, was a massive set of bars, the rods of iron vanishing up past his sight as he tried to see the true dimensions of this odd room. Truly, the only thing he could easily understand, as a small slip of paper that said seal over what looked to be a lock. Sliding closer he reached an unsteady hand up to run gently down the weathered parchment. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Naruto leapt back in shock. By the time he had landed he had already brought up a pair of kunai and was in crouch not unlike an Inuzuka boy in his class. There, leaning almost lazily against the bars, her forehead pressed between the narrow bars as she watched him, was a woman unlike any he had ever seen. She was tall compared to many women he had seen about the village, approaching 6 feet even in her slightly stooped posture. Her skin looked to be tanned, despite the fact that her apparent cell was so poorly lit, but that was not what really caught his attention. It was her eyes. The eyes that held a beauty in their sadness. The eyes he had seen staring back at him every morning in the mirror, despite their different colors. His eyes being the color of windswept seas, the kind that had claimed so many sailors off the coasts of Wave. Hers the shade of deepest emeralds, making the eyes of his crush Sakura seem so plain by comparison. Long, fire-red hair spilled about her face, obscuring it, but still there were her eyes, watching though the crimson curtain as he cautiously began to inch his way back to her. Who are you? A tired-sounding laugh echoed through the space, even in its state it seemed to carry something of a dangerous edge to it, not unlike the purple-haired woman he saw heading into the fenced-in forest every night, walking past one of his hide holes time and again, muttering to herself about things that he knew all too well. I thought that would be simple enough, Naruto-kun. Well, I know you have never known me, there can be no one else that knows you better. Despite what all he had been through that night, he somehow understood that she was not to be counted among the vast majority of the village that would go so far out of their way to harm him, be it physically or mentally. However, as one of his favorite saying went, earned once, flinched twice. Almost in response to his unspoken thought, the woman let out another laugh, for the first time raising her head a bit to let him get a better look, even as a sad smile graced full lips. I always liked that line, so fitting. Naruto-kun, don't you have even a slight idea as to who I am? As he watched the woman slide slowly to the floor, a place he just realized he himself was, as some part of his mind was starting to understand. He had seen this woman before, he just couldn't understand as to where. You're getting close, dear one, oh so close. His eyes wide in shock as the somewhat familiar endearment finally triggered his memory. Dear one, but that's… Yes, Naruto-kun, it's me. As Shiori. A delicate hand snaked through the bars to lie gently on his cheek, her thumb brushing away tears he didn't realize that he had been shedding, tears he had not let fall since the day he was kicked out of the orphanage 9 long years ago. After a moment it was her turn to have her eyes widen as his shaking hand came up to do the same. After a startled moment she leaned into the gentle touch, the likes of which she hadn't felt in more than 100 years. Yes, Naruto-kun, it's me. The teen scooted closer to the bars, doing his best to reach through and pull the woman into a hug, the cold of the steel bars, offset by the almost ethereal warmth that permeated the boy's being. The pair simply sat there for a time, basking in the simple presence of one another. Shiori-chan, what's going on, who are you? She pulled back slightly and looked into confused eyes in sadness. The silver-haired one told you, dear one. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as he fought the initial knee-jerk instinct to pull back. It was slight, but he caught the hurt look that flashed across her angelic, or should it be demonic features before he leaned back in, already missing the warmth. Why, you're the fox. She let out a held breath and fought the urge to purr at the closeness, a feeling she hadn't had in so long. I have had many names, Naruto-kun, my first, before my change, was Shiori, then came Inari, others called me Izanami, Lassia, Kamorkus, the list continues, now I am simply the Ninetales, the Kyuubi no Kitsune. While she couldn't see it, Naruto's jaw hung in silent awe. The fox sealed into him was a goddess. But if you are Izanami-sama, then why? Her voice was one of barley-controlled rage. Now she really did seem like that purple-haired woman. I was tricked, Naruto-kun, please understand. I never wanted to do what I did. All I remember was sitting among a glade, my glade, then there was this pull, then I was here, in my trickster form, only far larger, then the attacks came upon me, and all I had time to do was try and survive. Understand, even a goddess, as your kind calls me, can be killed with the right attacks. I was afraid, then your father came on the Toad King and… My father? The woman reared back, hands coming up to flatten what Naruto had seen for the first time, a set of fox ears situated at the top of her head, their deep red color melding well with her hair, and in the darkness the black tips were all but invisible. The woman looked at with pained, shocked eyes as she stroked her ears and glared at him a silent question. The teen had the good grace to look a bit sheepish before he scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. Sorry, but you surprised me. You knew my father, but you said he was on a giant frog. Toad. Amphibian. The pair chuckled a bit before he continued, but if he was writing that, then that means he's the fourth Hokage. Only Shiori's hands kept the young man from falling back onto the cold stones. The act would have made the woman laugh if it was anything less world-shattering for the boy. Then why? Do not hate your Jiji, Naruto-kun, you must understand how hated the fourth was in the world, if anyone knew. Hard eyes stared into hers, making her want to jerk back in surprise. No, Shiori-chan, it would have just been a drop in the bucket compared to what I went through here. She let out a heavy sigh as the pair separated. Absently they both rubbed their arms, already feeling that much colder. Naruto-kun, I'm not going to tell you that it was anything but a nightmare, but you do know he did all he could, don't you? He ground his teeth in frustration but let out a nod. He wasn't the elemental nation's foremost expert on the cages for nothing, or at least that's what he considered himself. He knew the third was getting too old for the job. Hell, he was too old for it 10 years ago, but still he soldiered on, and to help with it he had set up a council of elder and advisors, something that had not been seen in the nation save in times of war, when the cage was expected to either be on the field or at the least the foremost protectorate for the villages. This council had been working wonderfully, in every respect helping to strengthen the village and safeguard its citizens. Working so well in fact that many of the other nations were considering starting their own councils to help expedite decisions and help with the economy. It worked beautifully for everyone involved. Everyone, except for Naruto, the demon child and murderer of their beloved fourth. No, for him it had made life a living hell. They voted to withdraw his support stipend, leaving him with only what money he could scrounge from salvaging scrap from the various training fields and trash bins that he would sell to one of the few shops that would let him in. They had denied every petition that came from that family, Tenton's family, to adopt him, same with the duo from his favorite raiment stand. Every move was blocked and stamped into the dirt. Naruto even had to be careful how he approached the two businesses, lest he caused them too many problems. Shiori winced slightly as the boy remembered his friend, Tenton. The pair had been almost inseparable from the day they had met, her throwing weapons at the back of her family's forge, testing the balance for her father. Well, that was her excuse. When one of the blades glanced off another that was already embedded into the straw target, the knife spinning out into the bushes where she heard a strangled cry. After searching for the source of the cry she let out a scream, one that quickly drew her mother and father outside to see her cradling the boy's head in her lap as she cried, the kunai lodged firmly in his stomach. When the family had rushed him to the hospital, only to be turned away they stormed the Hokage tower, and upon seeing the wounded child called in his personal physician before rushing to the hospital. Konoha's new medical force was the best that had been seen since the days of Tsunade. However, their halcyon days were numbered, as eventually the pair were to enter the academy, and with Naruto being a year older, it looked to be that they would never get to be together. All the hard work the pair had done to create their timing had been wasted. But then Naruto had failed, only the two knowing it was purposeful, in an attempt to skew the teams. Naruto had done all he could to make sure that the pair would be together in the grading curve, letting the two hopefully be together, coupled with another orphan, Rock Lee, the pair would have been unstoppable, but then he had failed again, despite the fact he knew he had aced the test, knew that he had gotten a perfect on the throwing weapons, and a well above average on the ninjutsu's portion, only failing to create a bushin. Lee had utterly failed that portion and still passed, even if he had been in the bottom of the barrel, having only barely scraped by in weapons, Taijutsu and the written test. Yes, the council had done well, exactly what they had wanted. Now he had failed again and Naruto-kun stop, please we'll make it better, trust me. Naruto looked back up into pained eyes and gave a weak smile before his eyes widened and he shot to his feet, making Shiori rise as well, Iruka-sensei. He's in trouble, I have to. The redhead raised her hands in a placating manner, Naruto-kun, understand, here, in this place, time has no meaning, and I have much I need to say. He cocked an eyebrow at her before settling to the floor again, absently wishing he had a chair, and, much to his shock, both he and Shiori were suddenly sitting in the large overstuffed chairs that the Hokage had in his study. The fox girl looked at him in surprise before grinned and snuggling deeper into the soft leather, her many tails, something Naruto was shocked to see as he had somehow missed them, came up to create a kind of blanket for the woman, covering long, lean, tanned legs that were easily seen thanks to the short-skirted black kimono she wore. Pushing the current surprise out of his mind for a moment as he watched her tuck her legs under her, yes, Shiori-chan. She let out a strained sigh before gathering her thoughts. Naruto-kun, do you know how ninjutsu and genjutsu came to be? The teen's head shook, understand Naruto-kun, what I'm about to tell you, no one in your world knows, even I do not possess all the knowledge to answer all your questions. This made the boy gape slightly, earning a chuckle from the woman. You know of the demon wars, yes? He nodded, and for a moment she was happy that he could be so attentive when he wanted to. My tale reaches further back than that, but know that the first ninja in your world was known as the Sage of Six Paths and is considered to be every ninja's first true ancestor. As without him you all would be unable to utilize ninjutsu or genjutsu. However, at one time, he was not the only one, he was simply the last survivor. No, at a time they were the ones that went to battle against the demons in order to save their world, and in the end, they destroyed it, drunk with their own power and changing, due to what had been done to them, only the sage was left sane, and did all he could to stop them. How did they gain that power? She ran a hand absently through her hair, and for a moment, as her sleeve was pulled up, Naruto saw what looked like injection marks on her arm. Naruto-kun, we were soldiers, the most powerful of us were deemed demons, and they thought we had gained too much power too fast they turned on us, and only the sage understood that it was they that were losing control. Naruto-kun, we were all given things that we were not told much about, only that it would give us the power to serve. Naruto, at first I wasn't even human, just one more test subject in the lab. One of the girls there named me Shiori. The teen across from her was at a loss, he knew she wasn't human, the ears told him that, but to be a simple animal in a lab what all had been done to her to get to this point. There were 10 of us, all different animals, they were testing ways to grow weapons for humans. You see they had found a number of girls in the sea, girls that had truly incredible powers. The one who named me seemed to possess the most power and was in the deepest levels of hell for that place. It was all any of us could do to comfort her, in our limited ways wherever she had some from. They had developed a way for people to use different elements at their whim, channeling power through their bodies in ways you wouldn't believe. She told them that they had cultivated this substance, Adam, in slugs, as they wouldn't be able to escape and didn't have the intelligence to develop things further. They thought that they could increase the yield of this stuff if they put it in other animals it worked, but they didn't know how it would react with some of us. When the cat they used it on sprouted another tail they started to worry. Humans, we were responsible for the biju. Her eyes were rather vacant as she stared out into the blackness, her whole being lost to time for now. As the months passed, some of the girls stopped coming. There was only the first. At the time I couldn't understand human tongue, so I had no idea what her name was, only that she always looked rather content. I think now I understand that she was not unlike us, but she had someone with her that was comforting her all the time, even if I couldn't see him anyway. Eventually it came to human trials. That's where things started to go wrong. I'll spare you the details, but it led to the end of it all. The 10 of us, as well as a few of the good ones, had to band together to try and save what we could, but it wasn't without cost. As the years passed and humans destroyed themselves, the world changed. These powers were never meant for mortals, and the 10 of us being changed into the farms had displaced us from time. We could only watch as you tore yourselves apart, then started to try and rebuild. That's when the end for us came in the form of Kyuubi. He had gone mad, and the most powerful of the humans rose up to stop the demons. The sage had to seal him away to protect us all. But we were still lumped into that same group, and many were sealed into different forms. I hear tell that the one tail was put into a teapot of all things. She gave a mirthless laugh at the thought before containing. At the time I had been in hiding for a very long time, watching people as best I could. A goddess for many anyway. The sage, being the last of the humans with this power after his purging, had 2 sons, and the long continued, diluting itself over the hundreds of years, even as the mutations continued. Now your people must use hand signs to create the same effects of the first ones. But even the sage was never as strong as the girl. I miss her, and often wonder what had happened to her. Shiori-chan, if you don't mind, what was she like? A sad smile graced her lips as she looked at him. She was a lot like you, Naruto-kun, at first. She seemed to care about anyone, and I think she understood that there was no good or evil, only the pain we all feel, deep down, and did what she could to try and lessen it. Even with us, she tried to make us a bit more comfortable in the cages, bringing us bits of food and little toys. He smiled as a wide grin formed on her face. I had this little ball with a furry tail that would shake when you sorry. She was soft-spoken, rarely yelling, and moved with a grace that I could appreciate. I even modeled this body after hers, at least as best I could. She smiled a lot like you. Naruto felt a blush creep up on him as she compared him with someone so obviously important to her. She let out another sad sigh before she squared her shoulders. We can talk about her later, Naruto-kun. For now you must know the reason I'm telling you all this. You have that same blood in you, that same substance and mutations that all the other ninja aspirants possess. The difference here is, you also have me, the strongest of the free creators left in the world, sealed within you. But you're not free. He got a tail, whacking him in the head for his trouble. Do you want my help or not? He gave her a playful grin before clearing his throat and trying to look a bit more serious, the act only making her smile all the more. Yes, ma'am. She gave a curt nod. Good, now then, as I said, you have that blood in you, but it is diluted. I can fix that, but it is not without its risks. You could change, like the others. However, with a bit of luck, I can help guide these changes, should they occur, but for now, we will have to focus on the powers, rather than the physical. Your teacher needs your help, and I can feel them growing closer. Make no mistake, your Iruka is strong, but he was gravely injured in trying to protect you, and soon you will have to act. How Shiori-chan, Mizuki's a chunin. I know I learned a good move, but will it be enough? She smirked as the teen rose from his seat to grip the bars. Naruto-kun, you know better than I that with all your training, even with the bad food, that you could probably handle him. I simply wish to give you that edge, and to start you on the path to greatness. He gave her a long, strange look. Why? Shiori's face froze in a mask of shock. She had been hoping he wouldn't ask that. Pardon. Why do you want to help me? Why don't you hate me? Try and break free. She gave the young teen a soft smile. I could never hate you, Naruto-kun. You had no control over what all has happened to you, so much like happened to me, to us, even back in the labs. We never had it as bad as you did. Despite the tests, at least we knew they were going to feed us, and we had the first-star girl. But don't you want out? Yes, but not at the cost of your life. Naruto-kun, if you try and remove that seal, then we die. She saw the devastated look in his eyes as he plopped back into the chair. She crept forward again to run a hand down his cheek. Do not fear, Naruto-kun. I could not have asked for a better container than you. Your dreams, their purity, they sustain me. I will always been with you, Naruto-kun, whispering to you, guiding you. Never fear, even in your darkest, I will never leave you. Shining blue seas turned to deep emerald orbs in a mix of curiosity, joy and sadness. Stormy blue eyes flicked about her face for a moment, searching for any deceptions, before she lashed out. Faster than he could react, her hands took his orange jumpsuit by the collar and pulled him to the bars. Dimly he was aware of the dull pain of his cheek striking steel, but that thought was blasted away as he felt her lips pressed to his in a hungry kiss. His eyes were wide in shock for a moment before he let them flutter closed, his body leaning against the bars. However, before he could reach his arms around her, she pushed him back with a giggle, a hand absently coming up to wipe a stray tear from her cheek as she wrapped her arms around herself and let out a laugh. "Our time is up, Naruto-kun, you have to go now, but keep an ear open, we have not finished here." Before he could object, he felt the world seeming to draw away, much like it had when he had first found himself in the sewer. Slowly, but getting faster, he saw the cage pulling away, only to be replaced by the darkened forest. In that moment his senses came rushing back to him, damp earth, fresh blood, blade oil, it was all there. He had to fight the urge to jump up as he heard a crash behind him as Mizuki was thrown into another tree by Naruto. Mizuki looked at the boy in shock. How did you know I wasn't Iruka?" Naruto smirked before falling back against a tree before he was covered in white smoke. "That's easy because I am." Mizuki growled as he staggered to his feet. "Why? You hate the fox as much as I do. He killed your parents." Naruto froze behind his stump at hearing Iruka agree, his world darkening that much more at the thought of it. "You're right, I hate the fox but not the boy." Tear-filled eyes shot open even as he felt what was like a hug come over him. "I told you, Naruto-kun, trust your heart now, it is time. Push my power into your hands and focus on what you feel the most comfortable with, so long as it can deal with that trash. For the boy I have nothing but respect, he is an excellent student. You'll never understand him, he has been through worse than any of us and it has given him empathy, something more of us need. If you love him that much then I'll send you along first." Iruka gave a sad smile as Mizuki brought his second shuriken to bear, its razor edge becoming a blur as it started to spin before he reared back. "So this is the end. Sorry Naruto, looks like I won't be able to see you achieve your dream." However, before the blade could be loosed, he saw an orange blur and Mizuki was sent flying into a nearby tree. Steel blue eyes locked on Mizuki as Naruto felt that same red chakra flow through his body, settling on his hands, the two older ninja watching in shock as his left hand and forearm began to shimmer slightly before what looked like a whirlwind encased his arm. With a right, Iruka had to fight the urge to shout in shock as his shin seemed to split before, from the open wounds, what looked like a honeycomb began to form. From the blackened recesses of the comb came crawling what looked to be wasps, but they were far too large for a normal insect. "If you lay one more finger on Iruka-sensei, I'll kill you." Mizuki smirked as he whipped the blood from his lip. "There you are, demon. That makes my job that much easier, now die." Again the shuriken came forward, but much to his surprise Naruto flicked his left hand forward and what looked to be a small cyclone appeared on the forest floor right in the path of his weapon. As the shuriken passed over it, the wind suddenly intensified and blew itself out, but the job was done as the blade was sent sailing into the night sky, only to come back down and stick into a tree. "My turn. Kage Bushin no Jutsu." Mizuki and Iruka watched, mouth agape, as hundreds of Narutos filled the forest, each popping joints, rolling shoulders and in general, looking as intimating as they could, the sounds of buzzing filling the night air, as well as the sounds of rushing wind. "Naruto-kun, use them together." He gave a curt nod, and as Mizuki started to fall back in shock, another small cyclone appeared on the ground behind him, and as his seat hit the floor, it sent the man airborne, bowing his back like an inverted U. However, as he reached the tops of the trees he hit another, then another, and another. Again and again the Chunin-turned traitor was thrown about the forest, slamming painfully against trees only to be launched once more. Finally he seemed to reach the end of his journey, silted eyes staring blurry down at the forest floor, only to see what looked to be 10 more of the little cyclones, but that alone is not what made his eyes widen again in horror. No, it was the fact that interlaced in the wind were what looked like massive insects of some form, their buzzing only hinting at the pain that was to come. Now for a new jutsu. Straight from Naruto's ninja handbook. Assassin's Typhoon. The Swarm of Death. As Mizuki hit the ground he was launched again into the air, however this time he was not alone, hundreds of the massive wasps swarming about him, stinging and, much to his horror, biting hunks of flesh from his hands and face, before the feeling of weightlessness took him once more, his body rotating lazily in the air as the swarm that had been left behind in his mad flight caught him, holding him in the air for a time before he plummeted to the earth once more, where he was grabbed by a squad of newly arrived Anbu. The sounds of popping filled the forest that night, as well as a great plume of white smoke, as the clones dispelled themselves, and Naruto stumbled over to Iruka, his reserve spent. "Iruka-sensei, are you okay?" He gave a weak smile before nodded, then gesturing for the teen to come closer. "Come here, Naruto, and close your eyes." Naruto did as he was asked and felt his older brother pull his goggles from his forehead, before replacing them with something that felt oddly cold. "Now, open." He did so to see an Iruka he had never seen before, something about him just looked off. "Congratulations Naruto, you graduate." The boy's eyes widened in shock as the rays of the rising sun pierced the dense treetops, causing the steel on his forehead to reflect light onto his injured teacher. He could only stare for a moment before he launched himself at the older Chunin, hugging him for all his worth. Inside Naruto, Kyuubi watched and seemed to bask in the joy that was running through the young man, her man, if she had anything to say about it. Naruto, this world isn't ready for us, but here we are, and if I have anything to say about it, this rapture in your soul is just the beginning. The journey back to the village was a trying one for our young hero. It was still quite early in the morning, something he was both thankful for, but also cursed. While there would be far less people on the streets, meaning that many less glares and mumbled curses, those that were stumbling home from their night of celebratory drinking, those proud fathers and mothers of the academy graduates, having seized the opportunity for a night of wanton indulgence. These people were easily spurred into a mob, and with the lack of a larger crowd, they were all the more likely to act. After all, when there were many about, that meant that there were more witnesses that could be oh so easily coaxed into giving up their identities when Ibiki got his hands on them. Careful, almost skittish blue eyes darted into shadowed recesses and alleyways as he helped the hobbled teacher toward the tower, cursing that the Anbu that had carted away Mizuki to the hospital didn't take Iruka with them. He didn't care about carrying the man, far from it, but he knew their speed techniques could get him the help he so desperately needed all the faster. Iruka-sensei, if you think you can take it, I can move faster. The Chunin gave him a weak smile and shook his head, biting back the wince that wanted to take over his features. No Naruto, right now it's best not to rush, it could reopen some of these wounds. Naruto, however, couldn't hide his flinch. Sorry. Iruka grinned at the younger man, none of that, if I was faster I wouldn't have been hit. Naruto shook his head at that. No, if I had been better I wouldn't have needed saving at all. Hell, if I had seen through that bastard's trick, it wouldn't have ever happened. Naruto almost stumbled as he felt a phantom smack to the back of his head, an oddly furry one. Naruto, he was your teacher, you trusted him, it was he that was in the wrong there. Naruto, there was no way you could have known. Hell, I knew the man for years and never saw it coming. Although I think this explains the low test scores. Naruto snorted as they finally reached the smaller outer wall of the tower. You got that right, he all but walked out of the ring to give Sasuke the win in the tests, then used some kind of advanced grappling to throw me into a wall. Iruka did wince at that, he had always looked at Mizuki's offering to lead the sparring practicals as a godsend, having been forced to rise at ungodly hours to ready his lesson plans, coupled with long nights spent studying for his own Jonin exams or grading papers. Not for the first time he cursed his own failings, being dishonorably discharged from Anbu had hurt, but his demotion to Chunin had hurt more. Look, Naruto, I know I didn't do very well, but if you let me I think I can help make up for that. Naruto cocked an eyebrow at the man as they scaled the last of the spiral staircase to the Hokage's office, the boy's arms burning, with the exertion of carrying both his sensei and the scroll. What do you mean Iruka-sensei? You don't know, but there will be a month before team placements to give students a chance to rest and recover from the stresses of the test. If you let me, I would like to train with you, see where I may be able to help. I know that you train with Team 9, but Guy is not known for his ninjutsu or genjutsu training. That's where I come in. Naruto looked to his teacher with wide eyes, only those of Team Guy had ever made him such an offer, not for the first time this day. The team felt the sting of tears and gave a happy nod, surprising the Chunin at the fact that Naruto was actually being quiet in his joy, giving him one of the few, true smiles he had seen on the boy. The Hokage's assistant sent Naruto and Iruka a glance and pained smile, one of the indifferent ones, but never liking to see anyone hurt, before she opened the door for them, the pair stumbling in and quickly lowering Iruka. Naruto was a bit surprised to see two Anbu and the Sarutobi clan's personal healer were already there and waiting. Looking to their leader for a moment and seeing his slight nod they moved up to the teacher and with a swirl of leaves they were gone, earning a glare from Naruto. Why didn't you send them sooner? Iruka-sensei could have died. Hard brown eyes instantly silenced Naruto as he took a step back, he had never seen that look from the old man. Naruto, as much as I appreciate your concern, now is not the time to be making demands. What you have done this night is not something that can be simply ignored. Naruto swallowed the lump in his throat and hastily pulled the scroll from his back and dropped it on the desk. Sorry, Hokage-sama. Sarutobi hid his surprise well, in all the years he had known the boy he had never called him that, it seems he understood the gravity of the situation. Naruto, you know you will have to be punished, don't you? The blonde team gave a hesitant nod, he knew that if it came down to the council, then he was doomed. He would be dead before the afternoon bell rang. What is to be my punishment, Hokage-sama? The man let out a pained sigh as he pulled the wide-brimmed hat from his brow to rub his liver-spotted head. Naruto, I really didn't want to do this, you must understand. Seeing the younger man start to tremble, he pressed forward. Naruto, I'm afraid the only punishment fitting of this crime is a life of service. The boy felt his heart drop into his knees as he felt the phantom arms wrap around him once more, words too soft to understand echoing in his mind. VIP prison. He gave the boy a pained smile. Naruto, in 1 month's time your cell will be ready for you. Naruto could feel not only himself, but Shiori blink for several long moments in confusion bordering on shock. Excuse me? I thought that I would be sent off right away. Sarutobi finally let a grin split his weathered face. Unless I'm mistaken, your sensei passed you this morning Naruto, and therefore in 1 month you must be placed in a cell. The aged leader dropped into his chair holding his ribs in laughter as Naruto's jaw connected with the floor, his shoulders hunched as his arms hung limply at his sides. What? Sarutobi whipped a tear from his eye as he placed the hat back on his head. Naruto, you may be a great prankster, but you are 50 years too young to be able to outprank me. Naruto's mouth opened and closed several times, the act making him little more than a fish for a moment before he dropped limply into a chair across from the Hokage. But I stole the scroll. The older man nodded, indeed, at the order of a superior officer, as you should have. You then aided in apprehending a traitor who sought to steal it. Did you not? He gave a hesitant nod. And the scroll is unharmed. Naruto gave a half shrug, anyone could see that it was dirty and somewhat frayed now. Then I don't see a problem. The pair sat in a strained silence for a time, Naruto screwing up the courage to ask what had been on his mind, even in his fight with Mizuki, Mijiji. Why didn't you tell me about my dad? You could have heard a pin drop across town as a suffocating silence descended on the room, Sarutobi gaping at the blonde before he schooled his features. What are you talking about Naruto? I don't know Huyo. Naruto's knuckles went wide as his hands clenched into tight fists, his hands letting out a painful sounding series of pops. Old man, don't lie to me. He rose to his feet and let a fist impact the table, the skin on his knuckles splitting and his blood pooling. My father was the fourth. He put Shiori-chan in my gut. Now talk. Now it was the old man's turn to look a bit confused. Shiori. The Kyuubi. The Hokage gave a slight nod, filing the name into the back of his head for now. Naruto, you must understand, it was for the best that. Again his fist crashed into the desk, don't give me that shit. You know it would have made the world of difference, I would have friends I wouldn't be hurt all the time, but I would have tried Naruto, you must know how much they hated the fourth. Naruto eyed the man for a moment, noting that he had never looked quite that tired before, and you must know that they would have had to come through the whole of the village to get to me. I know we were hurting after the Kyuubi attack, but they were decimated after the war, they would be in no shape to come after me. So tell me another. He let out a pained sigh before rising and moving over to his own painting. There he slid it aside to reveal a complex-looking seal that was quickly opened with a swipe of blood. A section of the wall simply dissolved into nothingness as the Hokage reached into the little cubbyhole and pulled out 2 scrolls. Taking a moment to reapply the seal and replace the painting, he tossed the scrolls to Naruto, who was a bit surprised to see both the third and the fourth seals on them. Open mine first, I made sure you would be able to, should I die in office. Naruto flinched at the thought of the old man, the only one that really took care of him, dying. With a practiced hand he cracked open the scroll and unfurled it, surprised to see that it actually had a pair of seals under a short message. To the bearer of this scroll, this has either come to you by my will or my passing. Contained herein are 2 private messages to one Naruto Uzumaki. Do not inform him of the existence of or gift him with these scrolls until you feel he may be ready for them. They are messages from his family. Please see to the last scroll of our honored fourth. It explains more of the unique nature of said man. The third Hokage, here is in Sarutobi. Deciding to heed the words in the scroll he instead rolled it up, surprising the aged leader, before turning to the other scroll. To those concerned, these final words of the fourth Hokage, Minato Nimikaze, the Yellow Flash, Seal Master of Konoha. Know that there is little time, so please bear with me. Even though the Kyuubi is bearing down on us for reasons that we cannot fathom, and soon I will have to enter battle against the beast. Now if you are reading this then I assume that you are my successor, and you will need to know about the horrific burden I have placed upon those dear to me. My son, I hope, is to be seen as the hero he is for keeping such a beast at bay, and you may or may not know him as Naruto Uzumaki. You may be wondering why he and my dear wife do not bear my name, but my reasoning is twofold. Firstly, as you know I had made quite the name for myself in the war, and with good reason I fear retribution against them for my actions. Although I hope that my dear Kushina can keep them at bay, I decided it would be best to take that extra precaution. The second is a bit more practical. I don't want my boy to grow up like some spoiled brat, or worse, one of those uptight Hyuga. Please do not inform the boy of his true heritage until his mother feels he is ready. The fourth Hokage, Minato Nimikaze. Naruto growled slightly, but after a moment nodded, it made sense. He remembered seeing Neji in school. He was an insufferable ass, and Sasuke was 1,000 times worse, thinking that he didn't even have to acknowledge people at all. At least Neji would do that much. Letting out a sigh he rolled up the fourth scroll and tossed it back to Sarutobi, and, after a moment of thinking about it, tossed the other as well. At his strange let out a tired sigh, as much as I may want to read it, and I really do, you have never steered me wrong old man, so I'll wait until you think I'm ready. The Hokage simply gaped at Naruto for a moment, he had never seen the boy act this mature before. Naruto. He gave the man a pained smile. I had to do some growing up last night. I was tricked easily, ended up needing to be saved. I have a lot of work to do. The elderly leader sat back with a smile before tossing the scroll back to Naruto, who looked from the scroll to him again with an arched brow. You have grown, Naruto. When you get a chance, read those, but wait to be alone. When you are done, then come see me. Now, tell me about this Shiori. Naruto let out a sigh as he slipped the scroll into his vest. That's kinda a long story. I guess it started about the time I was kicked out of the orphanage. You know that night was bad. He winced at the memory. Naruto had been in surgery for 10 hours. Even with his healing abilities, it was touch and go. After the boy had been out for a week, the only thing the doctors knew was that he was dreaming. When I was sleeping, he let out a slight chuckle. I thought it was a dream. I was in that little clearing up on the monument you took me to, but there she was, sitting quietly and letting her feet play in the water for a little. I thought she was my mother. She was just so kind. No one else by Amni-chan had been. We just sat and talked. She told me stories, and we chased rabbits. Saratobi's eyes widened at seeing a tear slip down the boy's cheek. It was times like this that he was truly reminded of how young Naruto really was. Honestly, I never wanted to leave after that week. She forced me to go. She said that that was all just a dream, and that we couldn't live in our dreams. We had to try and make them real. He let out a pained sigh. Then I woke up. After that I never saw her again, but I remember that place. It's the reason I kept making you take me there. I was hoping that maybe. You don't have to say it, Naruto. I know how you feel. Naruto's head snapped up, his face a mask of fury, but bit back his retort at the look in the elderly man's eyes. He was harshly reminded at the loss of the man's wife, one of his sons. He gave a sad smile and a slight nod. Yeah, I guess you do. The pair sat in silence for a time before Naruto took a shaky breath and pressed on. It was reaching noon by the time Naruto had finished with his story. As each hour passed, the Hokage's eyes seemed to widen further and further. Well, it was hard to fathom. At the same time, it did explain a few things. How humans developed the ability to wield the very elements themselves. How great beasts would be able to speak, let alone the skill to summon them. The seemingly random evolution of the different bloodline limits and the chakra heart that all ninjas seemed to possess. Something that civilians had, but it seemed to have either let it atrophy or simply have it that way when born. He did make sure to note the way he blushed towards the end of his tale, making sure to gloss over the physical description of the woman sealed inside him. Lucky bastard seemed to have quite the woman already smitten with him. The figure of a goddess, literally, with potentially thousands of years of knowledge to bring to bear. His student would kill to meet this woman. Naruto, you can speak with Shiori. Can you ask her if this purifying of your blood will be genetic? Naruto didn't even have to repeat the words before he gave a slight nod. She says it's no different from when they were first injected into the test subjects. Just with her and me, she should be able to help with any random mutations. Although that should be at a minimum because of the fact I'm not going to keep injecting myself with the. After another moment of mumble seemingly to himself, he continued. She called it a plasmid or the other a gene tonics. She said that she would simply listen to what I would like to see, and she would see what she could do, but that she couldn't do much more, as my healing rate already pushed things. Saratobi's eyebrows rose a bit at that. The Kyuubi no, Shiori, could alter Naruto's genetic code to whatever he wanted. Would there be a limit to his power? Naruto, is there any adverse effects between these tonics and the other powers? After another moment he shook his head. No, according to Shiori, the tonics will affect the body, or modify the effects of the powers, making them more chakra efficient or more powerful. Or could make me stronger, faster, and the like. It really depends. Also, according to her, one of the main problems was that people would exchange the tonics too often, getting what they needed or wanted at the time that lead to a greater chance of mutation. It was like a drug to them. The Hokage scowled at the thought of such people, but who was he to judge? If he had a little jar here with a liquid that promised to extend his life 50 years, and all you had to do was inject it, he would jump at the chance. Thinking for a moment on the repercussions of the alterations, he made a decision. Naruto, I want you to report to me before team assignments. Let me know what all the Kyuubi Archuo leveled a glare at the man Shiori has done to you. Depending on that, we may be able to circumvent your father's wishes. Saratobi could almost see Naruto exchanging a look with his inner self. Was his rather lacking reply. Naruto, you know about some of the clan laws, yes? He gave a hesitant nod. Naruto, if you are the last of your clan, or if you are in possession of a unique bloodline then you gain clan protections. Naruto-kun, they couldn't touch you without a clan majority vote, ninja or not. The civilians and even the elders could do nothing without their vote. It's not a final answer, as many of them don't like you, but they won't let their emotions interfere with the village. Naruto was a little shocked to realize that even as Shiori was talking he had been repeating her. Well, he wasn't worried. The Hokage was another matter. Naruto, how many times has that happened? Naruto just shrugged. Never, to my knowledge. It's not something I make a practice of, Lord Hokage, and I can't do it for long. It's only Naruto-kun that will allow it at all. I'm thankful for his trust in this, but you should understand that I possess a bit more knowledge in this field than he. The elderly leader let out a heavy sigh. She was right, but that didn't mean he had to like it. She's right, Naruto, while the clan aspect is still closed to us, if she can give you that kind of power, then we can file you under the possessor of a new Kekkei Genkai. However, there would be a problem with it. The boy arched an eyebrow and waited for the answer. With such a clan act being initiated, you would be expected to take more than one wife in order to produce enough heirs and keep the bloodline active. Naruto sat in stunned silence for several long moments before a rather unique giggle sounded through his mind. Oh my, that could be fun. And nani? Sarutobi wasn't quick enough to cover his now ringing ears, looking at the boy in confusion. Said teen was currently pulling at his hair, mumbling something about having a pervert trapped in his head, making the older man laugh. Oh come now Naruto-kun, you must know that it's every man's dream to have more than one woman. Shiori, I wouldn't be able to get one woman, let alone more. He felt a phantom hand on his cheek once more, the soft stroking of her thumb earning her a content sigh from the teen. Naruto-kun, you and I are bound to one another until the day you die, and let me tell you, with my alterations, it will be a long life indeed. A marriage will be only a formality at that point. Shiori, you shouldn't have to marry me just because. He winced at another smack to the head. None of that. Would I kiss you if it was simply that you and I are stuck together? Remember what I said to you this morning? He felt a strange warmth settle in his chest at that. You said that you couldn't have asked for a better container, that you would never leave me. He could feel her nod and a playful smirk to her tone. It doesn't hurt that I know what you look like under all that orange. Naruto seemed to choke on nothingness for a moment, flushing to his hairline and making the elder arch an eyebrow. Naruto, are you alright? He gave a slow nod before hearing her chiding voice one more. Also, we're going to do something about those jumpsuits. He winced, but before he could answer her pressed on. Now, none of that. I know all about it and we will overcome it. We will rise above it all, dear one. None will stand against us. Sarutobi watched in interest as for the last several minuets the man across from him had his face run the gambit of emotions, all ending with a steely look in his eyes, before giving a curt nod. Hokage-sama, Iruka-sensei has requested this month off to train me, and with Shiori's help, I think I can make great strides. Do you know what the teams are yet? His leader gave a shake of his head. Not all of them, not yet. All I know is that the Yamanaka, Nara and Akimichi will be teamed together at the request of their fathers. He let out a bark of laughter at that. Oh, Shika and Ino are going to love that. Well, I hope when it comes to me you will be kind, old man. The Hokage laughed at that. As kind as I can be, Naruto, as kind as I can be. Now get out of here and get some rest. I know you haven't slept since yesterday, and I bet you're about to drop. Naruto didn't want to say thing. He had been fighting the yawns for the last few hours, and even Shiori was starting to sound tired. He gave a grateful smile before pulling himself to his feet and turning to leave. Oh. Naruto, I was wondering, could you give me a demonstration of those powers of yours before you go? The teen smirked as he focused on his hands once more, like before the shimmer surrounded his left hand before the whirlwind formed again, even as his skin split on his right to let the hive emerge, the several-inch-long wasps beginning to crawl on his arm. The elderly leader gaped at the boy for a moment before he flicked his left hand at the desk, the resulting cyclone sending his papers scattering about the room and ruining the carefully tended-to paperwork. The old man letting out a string of curses before he was silenced again, a swarm of wasps flying out and pinning the different papers all over the room before they seemed to fade into blue whips of chakra, the stingers keeping the documents in place. Naruto's smile could outdo the sun, even as Shiori cackled madly in his head. That's just a taste, old man. I'll let you know what else I can do when I lean to use it. He gave a small wave over his shoulder before stepping from the room and making his way home. It had been a long 2 days. And it will be a longer night still, Naruto-kun. Hero Fox. The feeling of sadness washed over him for a moment before she continued. No, Naruto-kun, as much as I may desire what you are thinking of. He winced a bit at that, earning a giggle. We have to start the changes tonight, and I'm afraid it will be less than pleasant. To her surprise, he only laughed and sent the equivalent of a mental hug to her. Story of my life, Shiori-chan, only difference is this time it will be worth something. He could feel her surprise through their apparent link and smirked. Just let me be there when you are making the changes. I want to have at least a bit of input and make sure you don't do everything for your own interests. The pervert. He let out another bark of laughter, earning startled jumps from those around him as he rounded the last corner and started head down the last street that would take him to his little apartment. Anything for you, Shiori-chan. She decided that two could play that game, a purr dancing in his ear as she sent the sensation of a heated breath over the lobe. That, dear one, is my line. A shiver ran up the teen's spine as his apartment came into sight. Shiori-chan, how will this work? You said yourself I'll die if I remove the seal. A smirking redeed filled his mind's eye. Honestly, I don't know yet, Naruto-kun. It won't be easy, but we will find a way, trust me. You know I do, Shiori-chan. You never have to ask me for that. As the teen let the door close he felt that same ghost-like embrace he had been feeling most of the day and smiled before shedding his coat, letting a hand run down his arm absently, tracing one of many long scars that created a kind of map for him. They were light, faded, but he knew where they were, even if others could never spot them. He could feel a second hand behind his for a moment before letting out a sigh and fixing a quick 3 cups of ramen for his dinner, before quickly letting the noodly broth slide down his throat with a slight wince. He wished he had a chance to do a bit of hunting. He wished he had some rabbit. Sidestepping a few of the loose tiles he made a snaking path to his bathroom and kicked on the water. Not bothering to waste time for the water to get warm, the heater hadn't existed in the first place, having been ripped out when it was discovered who would be living in this apartment. All the heating systems had been removed, under the guise of the landlord needing to repair them, then simply leaving things as they were. Stepping under the icy spray without so much as a shiver, he went about washing off the blood and grime. Soap was luxury for the boy, keeping it in a bit of old pottery he had found, but he really didn't want the lingering scent of blood on him this time. He never minded his own, but this was Iruka's, and he wouldn't have that reminder reach his dreams this night. Inside him all thoughts the fox girl may have had to tease or tempt him had fled at that stray thought. She knew that he would be beating himself up about that for many a month, or at least until Iruka pounded it out of him in training. Instead she took the opportunity to order her thoughts as to what would need to be done this night. Knowing that at the least she was going to have to even out his physical form, years of malnutrition and physical abuse had stunted him to the point he had hardly grown an inch in 3 years. Rather than looking the part of a 16-year-old shinobi, he was more like the child of 10 he had been and had been ridiculed for it for much of his life. 1 down, a potential 100 to go. Shutting off the water and taking a moment to drip dry, he pulled back on his underclothes and pants. He headed back to his bedroom before plopping onto the bed and drawing out his scrolls. After a moment of thinking his eyes, and after sliding a few floorboards around, revealed his little cubby hole. It didn't hold much, a picture of him and the third. A small stuffed frog he had found at the foot of his bed in the orphanage. The small toy couldn't even be rightly called a frog anymore. It had seen so much wear. And lastly he had the kunai that had been pulled from his guy the day he met Tenton. That pain had led to one of the few true joys in his life, and he couldn't bring himself to get rid of it, much less use it in battle. He quickly added the pair of scrolls before moving a completely different set of boards to reseal the hidey hole. They would be there tomorrow, and he was so tired right now he was certain that he would never be able to recall it all come the morning, especially with what was going to be happening here soon. Jumping into the center of his bed he tossed off the threadbare sheets, knowing that in pain he would be thrashing a bit and not wanting to destroy the bedding. He lay back and at Shiori's suggestion pulled back off the orange pants, leaving the boy in a black sleeveless undershirt and his gray boxers before he lay back and let his eyes drift close, letting his mind drift back into the sewers that he had met her in last time. Shiori-chan. A smiling face appeared by the bars, as though summoned by her thoughts. Naruto-kun. Why are you here? You should be sleeping. He let out a mirthless chuckle at that before moving to the still prison chair and settling in. You know that I won't be sleeping tonight, so I thought I could keep you company. Have you come up with any ideas for me? She sank into the chair in her cell with a smile, only fixing your body for now, but I'm sure I can think of something as we go. Are you ready? After a moment of thought he let out a heavy sigh and nodded as he gripped the chair's arms in anticipation of the pain to come. It had been a long day and would be a longer night still. Blurry eyes took in the light of the coming dawn with a groan echoing through the brightening room. He had managed to get about 10 hours sleep and didn't remember much of the time he had with Shiori. That was both a blessing and a curse. While he was more than happy to not remember the pain, at the same time he wasn't entirely sure what all had been done to him either. Slowly the team made to sit up, his body screaming in protest. It felt like he had just gone 10 rounds with a Hokage monument. He absently slung his legs over the side and let out a yelp of pain as his feet slammed painfully into the floor. He pulled one back up to lap and rubbed it before freezing. He knew what his legs looked like, and these weren't his legs. They were too long, too muscular, what all had been done to him. He looked to his arms as well and was equally surprised. While he wouldn't be called a bodybuilder or anything, he was obviously strong. Just from looking he could tell that years of damage had been undone. While he still had his scars, the amount of muscle had been increased to what it should have been, he felt, after all the work he had done. He sent a question to Shiori only to be met with silence. A feeling of dread welled up in him as he settled to the bed in a cross-legged sit and tried to calm himself, doing his best to try and find his way back to the cage. After several panicked minuets there was a groggy voice echoing through his head. Naruto-kun, what's wrong? He let out a head breath and grinned ear to ear. Oh thank Kami, Shiori, you scared me, is everything okay? Iridid chuckled and he felt what had to be a pat on the shoulder. Oh course I'm alright, I'm just tired, you took a lot out of me last night. Naruto fought back the blush that threatened to take him over before giving a nervous chuckle. Shiori-chan, we didn't do anything did we? He could feel the playful grin as she sent another purr racing through his mind. It must not have been that memorable then, Naruto-kun, I'll have to try harder next time. He chuckled at that, not funny. A mad cackle met his ears, followed shortly by a yawn. I thought it was, but if everything is alright, then go get ready and try out this new body. I'm tired and need my beauty sleep. He sent a nod her way and made to stand, only to crumple to the floor as his body overbalanced itself. Blinking a few times he tried again and this time launched himself a foot off the ground before falling once more. Grumbling at the giggle in his mind, he pulled himself to all fours and slowly made to stand, his legs in a wide stance in hopes of lessening the loss of equilibrium, and with the help of his dresser succeeded in standing. After several long moments, practicing balancing and moving close to the walls, he was relatively certain he could walk and, shuffling, made his way to his bathroom again. There he had to fight the urge to rub his eyes, blinking owlishly at the sight that greeted him. There, staring back, was the Yondaime Hokage, only a bit younger and with whisker marks on his face. Taking a moment to slap himself, making sure he was not still asleep, he studied himself again. The one slightly round cheeks, the only fat he really had on his scrawny frame, had been burned off as his face seemed to lengthen a bit, his nose holding a less of a curve now, and while his eyes were still large and expressive, they now held a bit of a slant. Personally, he thought he looked a lot more fox-like with the whiskers. The once baggy black undershirt now seemed to conform to him like a second skin, as did the once baggy boxers, turning the fabric into something more like boxer briefs. A thick chest and strong shoulders helped explain why he was having trouble standing before, but he didn't look overly bulky in his mind, though he was certain if he made to body slam someone that they would feel it. The perverse giggle echoed through his head, and he had to fight the urge to send his own mental smack to the fox girl. He now knew for certain that she was the one that had been the guiding hand in this. His blonde hair had lengthened considerably and seemed to flare out in a long, spiked curtain behind him, and knew that this was going to create issues for him later on. However, as he was about to decide to slice it off with Tenton's kunai, he felt a sharp slap on his hand. Don't you dare. He gave a slight whimper as he absently rubbed his hair, but Shiori-chan, it's going to get in the way of training. But nothing. You look like a sea urchin before, and once you wash it I'm sure it will lay down better. Use strips from your old jumpsuits to hold it back and you'll be perfect. He grumbled a bit as he made to comply, ripping several long strips from the two small pants of his old jumpsuit before binding it in 6 places, his long hair reaching the small of his back as its own weight kept it laying down. Turning a bit he smiled at the effect, the orange offsetting his hair nicely, and the multiple bindings made it stand out all the more as he was certain that there wouldn't be anyone else in the village with his hairstyle. Pulling the bands of cloth free, he hopped in the shower once more and made sure to scrub his hair thoroughly, using the last of his soap to make sure it was clean this time before he finished getting ready, at least as best he could. With the only clothing fitting being his underclothes, he was forced to use a hinge. Taking a moment to make his choice, he went with a copy of what Iruka typically wore before heading out into town, making a beeline for the Higurashi Emporium, Tenton's home. Pausing before he left the apartment complex, he fought the urge to smack his forehead. This was a golden opportunity. He formed a quick cross-shaped hand sign, and at once half a dozen clones appeared. Quickly pulling out an impressive roll of bills, he doled the money out to his clones as he barked orders. Alright everyone, listen up, we won't have long before people realize who we really are. You, go to the bookstore and get books on taijutsu, tactics, strategy, home improvement or even just building new houses, and anything else you think we may end up needing. You head to the grocery store, stock up on everything, at least 3 months worth if you can, get canned everything if you can manage it, and you too help him. You will head to the Hokage Tower and tell the old man about some of these changes. You will be heading to the civilian clothing store, you know what I need. Once it's all done, see about getting the place fixed up. If you need more clones, send one to get me. Alright men, let's move out. With a curt nod the 6 took to the rooftops. Several hours later the village hospital would see an influx of people. Apparently there was some form of dementia spreading throughout the village, making several people think that the 4th Hokage had risen from the grave and had been on a shopping spree. The day had been unique. Yes, unique could be the best way to describe it. For one, he hadn't been on the receiving end of a single dirty look the whole day. If anything, he had been met with looks of shock, confusion, and in the case of some, blushes and looks of adoration. It was unnerving. The trip to the Emporium was a swift one, sticking to his back alley shortcuts for the most part, a habit more than anything. Once there he moved to the little side chute usually used for wood and coal deliveries and shimmied inside, thankful that the chute was as large as it was, otherwise he knew he would have gotten stuck. Instead all he came out with was debris and his long hair and several biting scratches on his shoulders and elbows. Blinking a few times in the sudden brightness of the store's natural lighting, he quickly slipped behind a rack of vests and tried to school his features, making it seem like he had been there all along. At least it worked when he was smaller. Now, with his increased height there was no way he was going to be able to go unnoticed. The tall blonde flinched slightly at the cry that came from the front of the store. "Hey. You. Hiding in the back. How the hell did you get in here?" Turning, Naruto blinked in surprise, and only his twitch reflexes saved him from getting a kunai in between the eyes. The blade glancing off one of the wooden racks behind him, sending a small storm of steel to the floor as the shuriken displays were upset. Before he could so much as blink, the girl was on him. Despite her now shorter height, she hefted him off the ground and brought her face dangerously close to his own before she hissed, "You have 2 seconds to explain what you are doing here before I throw you out. If you're lucky, I'll even use the door." The young man in her grasp could only gape at her and point weakly to a rack of clothing. It was now that Tenton noticed that his clothing didn't match what she had in her hand. While he looked to be wearing a Chunin vest and blue shirt, her hand was apparently inside the clothing. Taking a moment to focus her chakra, she sent a pulse through the man and let out a squeak of surprise as the hinge faded, revealing a young man in his underwear. Pervert. He held up his hands in an attempt to fend off her attack, but it was to no avail. She already had a hold on him, and it was all she needed to throw him bodily across the room and into the chute he had just pulled himself from. Tenton, with practiced ease, reached blindly to one of the many shelves and came back with a set of punch daggers. Naruto's head was still spinning as the enraged Kunoichi advanced on him, only to freeze as the early morning light fully fell upon him, or more specifically, his now exposed midriff. There, just below his solar plexus, was a fine diamond-shaped scar. Brown eyes locked on still spinning blues as the blades fell limply from her hands. "And Naruto." With a shake of his head he gave her a weak smile, "Remind me never to get on your bad side, sis." As he rose back to his feet, she had to fight to keep hers under her. This was not the boy she knew, the one she had seen 2 days ago, one who had been so small she could almost give rides on her shoulders. What happened? I dispelled the hinge. He grinned and scratched the back of his head, trying to hide his embarrassment as he slipped behind the rack of vests again, quickly reapplying the hinge. You did. Let's just say I had a growth spurt and leave it at that." But he let out a pained sigh as he came to place a hand on her shoulder, causing the girl to look up a bit to look him in the eye. "Tenton, I promise that I'll tell you everything when I understand it all myself, but for now, as you so keenly found out, I need some clothes." The bun-headed teen blushed to her hairline as her memory flashed with vivid detail. She was suddenly fighting the urge to drool a bit at the memory of those abs. Giving her own head a shake, she took a step back, trying to cool herself a bit, or pulled at her top, fanning it a bit, and almost laughed at Naruto's own flush. "So what were you thinking of getting, Naruto-kun?" He began to meander through the aisles, the girl following in his wake as he looked through their stock. "Something that could stand up to everyday missions. You're on an active cell already, so you were the first person I thought of. I have someone already getting some new casual clothing, so all I need is your help." She chuckled a bit, but nodded. The boy may be hyper, but he was no fool. His street smarts required nothing less. "I trust your mystery shopper will be avoiding the kill me orange." Naruto chuckled at that, but Tenton had to fight the urge to smack herself when she saw the pained look in his eyes. She knew well enough that he didn't buy those jumpsuits because he wanted to. He may have liked orange, but even he had a limit, and right now it looked to be the strips of cloth that were keeping his hair at bay. "You don't have to worry about that. Next time I meet you all for training, you won't even recognize me." That made her laugh aloud as she patted him on the back, a bit more than was needed. "Naruto, remember, I didn't recognize you 5 minutes ago." As her hand was coming down for another pat, she froze, realizing that she had been taking the chance to try and feel him up. She walked ahead of him several paces and started pulling clothing from the racks, shirts in all dark colors and a series of pants, before she tossed them to the blonde and pointed to a changing room. "Get." He let out a playful whoop before dashing into the room. Several minutes later he popped his head out. "Are you sure about this, Tenton?" She arched an eyebrow at that. "What?" "Well, it just seems a bit small." Now her curiosity was piqued. "That doesn't sound right. Come out, let me see." Naruto stepped from the changing room and caused Tenton's eyes to widen in shock. He currently had on a deep maroon long-sleeved shirt and simple black pants. However, the whole of the outfit was surprisingly tight on the teen, leaving very little to her imagination. Stopping just short of his waist, she tore her eyes away from the blonde and looked to where she had pulled the clothing from and was only more confused. It was the genin section. It should have fit. This time she did smack herself for her foolishness. He may have just been a genin, but he was still 2 years older than the rest of his class. Hell, he was a year older than she was, and now finally looked the part. Apologizing, she sent him back into the room and pulled a similar outfit from the adult section and tossed it over the door to him, earning her a shout of surprise. Her laughter was short-lived as she was on the receiving end of a face full of the smaller clothing. When she pulled them off her head, she smirked. "Much better. That's more like it." Naruto was liking the feel of the clothing. The cloths were the same in color, but this time the shirt was short-sleeved, letting him show off a bit, but he thought he could still do better. "Tenton, as much as I like the shirt, I think I would rather have something a bit more unique." She cocked her head at that but shrugged. "The customer is always right." The pair started looking through the different racks again before he spotted it and grinned, causing Tenton to smirk. The boy had style. Quickly gathering up the clothing he dashed back into the changing room and when he emerged she was not disappointed. Naruto still had on the same black pants, but this time his shirt was styled not unlike her own. A simple Chinese-styled white shirt with black trim, metal fastening running up his chest into a high collar, this time it showed off the whole of his shoulders and seemed to be almost as tight as the first red shirt, showing off the fruits of his training. Naruto could even feel Shiori purring in his mind as he looked himself over in the full-length mirror. Something was still lacking. Looking about for a moment he spotted what he was after, a deep almost royal blue weapon bandolier. He slung the sash about his waist where it would hang a bit off his hip, he doubted it would stay, but he knew he could tie it into position to be a bit more secure and it would be useful for holding his shuriken to boot. Turning to look at Tenton, intent on asking her for her opinion, he was met instead with a rather dazed look. Omni-chan. She shook herself out of her stupor and, not for the first time today, cursed herself for thinking of her little brother that way. Though who would blame her, the kid had gone from a shrimp to a shark in just 2 days. Sorry Naruto, what do you need? The pair set off into the store again and, after a moment of debating, he picked his way through the weapon sections as he explained what all he needed. First he asked her to have a selection of outfits like this one made or ordered in varying colors, all dark save his white. He decided he would wear that when he was about the village or training on his own. After all, he had gotten a lot better at stealth with the bright orange, so surely the white would make things that much tougher for him while he trained. Tenton instantly went into professional mode and whipped out a small notepad, not unlike what Guy and Lee would use, and jotted down the order, another 24 outfits, bandoliers and black sandals that he had requested to have metal plates installed into, complete with weight seals. Slowly the pair moved to the back of the store, where Tenton insisted on keeping the more unique weapons. After looking a moment he grumbled to himself that none of it would work. Tenton's cheeks puffed out in annoyance and demanded to know the problem with their stock. Naruto, raising his hands in order to placate the girl, launched into an explanation. Tenton, it's not the weapons, trust me, your stuff is the best, but it's just not going to work for me. Growling she advanced on the blonde, why? Letting out a sigh he focused his chakra into his right hand, her eyes widening in shock as his skin split before the comb peeked through and one of the large wasps came out. After her shock faded she took his hand hesitantly into her own and studied it. It seemed go from just below his wrist up through his fingers, exactly where she felt the chakra localized. Careful to avoid the insect she turned his hand over and winced slightly, now she knew what he meant, his palm and finger pads seemed to have the majority of the hive, making it impossible for him to hold normal weapons when he used it. Naruto, what happened? Taking a moment to collect his thoughts and letting the hive fade out once more, he answered, it's kinda long story Tenton, let's just say I awakened a bloodline and leave it at that for now. At least until I get this all sorted out in my head. She gave a slight nod as she poked, prodded and studied his hand and arm, all signs of the hive had vanished from his body. Are you related to the Aburum? She shook his head before let the chakra form in his left arm, again the cyclone appeared and raced up his forearm, causing the brunette to gape. Nope, I'm something else, and I'm still learning to control it. Right now I can only make the wasps come from my right hand, the wind from the left, but I think when I learn the differences that I can adjust it, maybe even use it in other places. I like the idea of a cyclone kick. She chuckled at that but nodded and set to work picking her way through the shelves once more, searching for a weapon that would suit the teen. So what are you looking for Naruto? Swords and staves are out of the question with your bugs, and I'm afraid that's what we specialize in. Naruto looked a bit depressed at that as they moved through the shelves. Eventually he came upon a rather strange-looking sword. Picking it up he was surprised to see how fine the blade was, it seemed to have almost no weight and from the design, it looked like it would never be able to hold up to a normal strike. He sent a questioning look to Tenton who picked up the sword and smiled. I know what you're thinking, but trust me, it's stronger than it looks. My dad designed it as a special order for a water user. The guy ended up being a bum and tried to skip out on the payment. My dad had to put out a B-class mission to track him down when he ran off with it. Anyway, the guy was looking for a weapon that was usable underwater. Dad said he had a jutsu that could encase the two in water, where the ninja would use his affinity to propel him along and would strike in passing. To that end he needed to have a sword that was light and thin, so it would slice through the water easier, so we made a set of these. Now though they are just gathering dust. It's a pity, they are really nice blades. I'll probably end up asking my father for them later on unless another water user shows up wanting them. They deserve a good home. Naruto nodded at that as he turned the blade over in his hand a few times, testing the weight. It was obviously well made, and upon studying it closer, he could tell there were a few seals placed on it that was probably used to keep it from breaking or to keep it sharp. Fine blades indeed. As he looked about at the other weapons close by he noticed a set of wrist blades and was suddenly struck with an idea. Tenton, how hard would it be to change these swords like the grips? She arched an eyebrow and shrugged, full tang blades are simple enough to change, many samurai requested, so they can update the wrap pattern and the sheaths to fit with different fashions. Stupid if you ask me why. She smirked as he ran back to where he found his glove and found a set of heavy leather bracers. Work with me on this. He belted the bracers on and brought up the sword to his forearm with the blade arching back towards his elbow. What if there was a hinge or a spring or something so that if I needed to I could he flip the sword forward with a twist so the blade was facing the proper direction. Realization dawned on Tenton and she nodded. Well, the blade was back. It could be used like an elbow blade or in running attacks, great for someone as fast as Naruto, but when snapped forward he could make slashing attacks. It would work, but it would also be hard to make and told him as much. The blonde grinned and waved her off. It's not like I need it today or anything, it's still a month before team placements, and in that time I'm going to be busy learning how to use my bloodline anyway. Take your time, talk to your dad and then let me know if it will work. She smiled and, after writing a bit more, nodded. I'll tell him, but you know that these wouldn't be very safe, you couldn't really sheath them. Thinking a moment Tenton's face suddenly lit up. I've got it, a storage seal could keep them in like with my weapon scrolls, it's perfect, all we have to do is. Naruto's tried as best he could to keep up with the little maniac, but she quickly left him in the dust as she took the swords, another set of bracers and made for the forge, forgetting all about the blonde in her zeal to create a new weapon. Naruto let out a sigh as he dropped his allotted cash onto the countertop and summoned a pair of clones to take his new wardrobe back to his apartment and after a moment summoned one more to track down the one in the civilian clothing stores so he could get something similar for when he was off duty. Heading out of the store once more he made his way back towards the fenced-in training grounds, so few even came close to the fence that I had been the prime place for him to train at for years. The few times that people had chased him that far they were all brought to a skidding halt when he would hop the fence. He never knew why. The place may have been scary, but so long as you were careful it was actually a pretty fun place. Well, if you stuck to the trees. The highest trees. Okay, it was dangerous as all hell in there, but it had saved his skin more than a few times, so who was he to argue with the place that had literally saved his life? Setting into a light trot he found his way to one of his hide holes and pulled out a bit of the dried fish he had hidden there. Eating a few strips to get back some energy he moved to a stump just outside the fence line and started to search his thoughts, trying to figure out what all had been done to him last night. You want to know? He jumped a bit at the voice, still unused to having someone with him all the time. Well, if I'm going to figure this all out I'm going to have to, won't I? Inside voice, dear one. Nodding he stuck with his thoughts. Sorry Shiori-chan, it's just taking some getting used to. He felt her wave him off before the pair settled in. Now, as you know, I evened you out a bit, made a few improvements here and there, and helped build up your regeneration rate a bit. Your body is roughly what you would have been at if you had eaten more than ramen all those years, not that that was a bad thing, you did all you could after all, but it was hardly a good meal for a growing lad. Your musculature and your skeletal structure have been tweaked a bit, giving them a bit more play. In essence, you will be retaining the traits of a young teen for quite some time, letting you build muscle a bit faster and keeping you from breaking bones as often. Younger bodies are naturally a bit more elastic, I guess you could say, letting them take a bit more punishment before breaking. Should help with training and your career. He gave a curt nod at that, making a mental list of his changes. A more flexible, harder to break skeleton was nice, muscles with more play, always good, even further improvements to his already impressive healing rate, gold. Not faster healing, Naruto-kun, but you should be able to bounce back from anything short of a severed limb, and even then, if you still have the limb, we should be able to do something now then. I'm sure you're a bit more interested in the other potential powers and how to bring them to bear. Yeah, Tenton made me start to think of that. Can I use the plasmid things in either arm? Or are they limited or what? She giggled a bit at that. Yes Naruto-kun, the plasmid things can be used elsewhere, you're simply used to shunting my chakra into your hands and arms, but because this is throughout your body, unlike with those that would inject them, and you could theoretically manifest them anywhere, with practice. And once you are used to applying my chakra you should be able to utilize them with your own. It will be a bit harder, but there are some techniques out there specifically meant to stop us, so it would be safer if you didn't rely on my power if you can. He cocked his head slightly as he tried to focus his chakra again, this time more on his right shoulder. Nothing happened. Okay, I give, how do I tap into these different powers? He could feel her smile before she took his hand in hers. After a moment of concentrating he felt she chakra sweep though him again, this time permeating his whole being rather than simply his hands, and felt himself start to itch a bit. Looking to his left hand this time he saw the skin split, then it seemed to dance up the whole of his arm, before the familiar buzzing filled the air once more. Before he could comment to Shiori about the change he felt an odd breeze appear behind him. Sensei's long hone from a hard life kicked in, and he pitched himself forward, rolling through the short grass to come up in a low crouch, his right hand grasping one of his new kunai tightly as he scowled at the stump, only to have his eyes widen in surprise at what he saw. There, with a short kadachi poised to strike, was the purple-haired woman he had seen heading into the forest at night. "What the hell are you doing at my forest?" Naruto scowled at that as he rose slowly to his full height, surprising the woman slightly. He was a big one. "Last I checked it didn't have your name on it, lady." She scowled at him as she sheathed the blade, the sheath hidden in the recess of her trench coat. Now that he had a good look at her, he had to fight back a blush. Whenever he had seen her before, he was more interesting in keeping hidden from any potential attacker. Now that he had a good look, he was shocked to see her choice of attire: fishnet, a miniskirt, greaves, sandals, belt and trench coat. That was it. He cocked an eyebrow at her rather unique hair, but had to smirk. With her stance, it was obvious she didn't take shit from anyone. "Fun girl. Listen here, you little shit. This place is restricted for jonin use only, you don't even have a headband, so get the hell out of here, Gaki." The purple-haired Kunoichi felt a chill run through her, and the teen's posture suddenly changed, where once he was standing tall with defiant eyes, now he seemed to be shaking, his eyes hidden in the shadow of his bangs as his fists clenched in anger. "What did you call me?" She flinched slightly at the seething anger that seemed to be pouring out of him at her, a bead of cold sweat formed at her neck, much to her cringe. "I said, get the hell out of here, you little shit." Cold blue eyes locked on pupil-less brown as he took a step forward, his chakra starting to surge around him. "I thought that's what you said. Listen here, you bitch. I'm sick of you people and you fucking problem. I was here first. I'm not even in your fucking forest. And even if I was, it's not your property. This damn place has saved my life 100 times, and I'll keep coming here as long as I damn well please, and only the Hokage can tell me otherwise, got it?" Not to be outdone, she stepped forward, her own chakra spiking as his hands twitched towards her kunai. "You fucking punk. Do you think I'm going to let you get away with calling me that in my own home?" That gave the teen pause, but it was quickly washed away as his anger peaked. The pair seemed to just watch once another for a moment before, as suddenly as they had met, they were at each other's throats, Naruto's kunai coming forward as one of her own rose to meet it. The rain of sparks and sharp clang filling the clearing and sending the nesting birds skyward. Naruto planted his right foot hard and, using his forward momentum, spun and turned the move into a back handspring, dodging a number of snakes that seemed to gush from her sleeves. Deciding on his own little friends, he threw his left hand forward and a swarm of wasps poured out, making the Kunoichi go wide-eyed in horror. She just picked a fight with a major clan member. Backpedaling and snapping her hand twice in quick succession, she let fly a dozen shuriken before her hands found a familiar cross-shaped hand sign, making Naruto's eyes widen in shock. Cage shuriken no jutsu. A dozen became 100 and sliced the swarm to ribbons, but much to her surprise, the bugs seemed to simply burn away into nothingness, tiny wisps of blue chakra. "Ha. Next time you take me on, kid, bring friends." Naruto smirked and brought his hands up into a matching seal and made 9 clones puff into existence. "If one won't work, how about 10? Each of the now gathered blondes made more hand signs. "How about 100? Again. 1,000? The clearing was suddenly filled with blondes. Everywhere she looked, she was an angry teen with kunai in hand and his left arm crawling with wasps. Grinding her teeth, she dropped her hips a bit and let her arms go seemingly limp as the first wave charged in. To his surprise, she seemed to simply flow around his attacks, like the snakes she had used before. She would lash out with little jabs, kicks and throws, dispelling the clones as fast as they would come. His eyes widened in horror as he realized a fatal flaw in his plan. With every clone that dispelled, a puff of white smoke would appear, eventually blocking him and his clones from seeing the purple-haired woman. "Everyone. Scatter." However, it was too late as suddenly the smoke cleared to reveal the Kunoichi astride a massive black snake, her grin maniacal as she turned to where the original had last been and laughed. "Not bad, Gaki. But it's time for me to show you why I'm a jonin." The snake surged forward, its great tail lashing out time and again to dispel the clones in its wake, even as she leapt back into the fray, helping to clear the flanks of blondes as the snake barreled towards its intended target. "Now Naruto, use the plasmids. Hurry. Before all your clones are gone." He felt Shiori's panic through their link and nodded, barking for his clones to scatter. He and the other teens let the wind come into play once more, 20 of them making traps all around the massive snake before turning their attention back to the Kunoichi. She was looking at one of the little cyclones curiously and sent a kunai at one of them, letting out a yelp of surprise as it blew itself out, sending her knife to the heavens. Looking back at her summon in fear, she saw what had to be 100 of the little tornadoes all around it. One wrong move, but the grimace, she sent out a pulse of chakra to the snake, dispelling it, and dropped back to the tree line, plotting her next attack. The battle had gone back and forth for the better part of 2 hours. Every time one would seem to get an upper hand, the other would run off, intent on getting a chance to formulate a plan, only to have the seemingly random nature of the other utterly spoil their cunning plots. Finally the pair just stumbled back into the clearing, they knew there was little point in hiding any longer, better to just get it over with. Tired blue eyes met hard brown as they settled into their stances once more. You know, for a little shit you're not half bad. Though he may be tired, he was never one to shy away from a challenge, and you're pretty decent for a crazy bitch. Anko's featured hardened once more as she took off like a shot. Naruto, caught unprepared, took her fistful in the face and fell back. Using the momentum however, he rolled and planted his feet in her stomach and launched the woman into the air. Surprised eyes locked on smiling blues as he pulled a brace of shuriken and sent them skyward. Anko's smile grew as the kunai tore into her, much to the blonde's horror, before she seemed to lose her color and fall into clumps of earth before him. His eyes widened in surprise when he felt a pair of hands on his ankles before he was pulled underground, only his head left above the earth. Looking about the clearing in fear, his eyes settled on her as she seemed to simply bloom from the ground, no signs of the long battle anywhere on her person. Smirking, she walked forward to tower above him before she knelt down, a kunai coming free to settle against his cheek. Say it. Her only answer was a scowl. Reaching down, she took his jaw firmly in hand, making him look her in the eye. Say it. Beat me? She smirked. Maybe later, now say it. Fuck you. Cheat sked, never without dinner. I won, you lost, just get it over with. If anything, his anger only grew. Why don't you? You caught me. Now you can finish it. She arched an eyebrow at that. What the hell are you babbling about? Now it was his turn to scoff. I know you're not dumb, you caught the fox. It just made her look all the more confused before she got a bit closer and seemed to really notice him for the first time, falling back on her ass in shock as she scrambled a few paces away. You're the Uzumaki brat. If anything, he looked all the more confused as she pulled herself back to her crouch. What, just figured it out? Come on then, you get to be the great hero, killer of the monster, so come on. Anko dropped to the ground beside him as she pulled her knees to her chest, looking down at the now dirty blonde hair. Kid, what the hell happened? You were just a little guy. He growled and tried to get his hands free enough to make a clone and wasn't having much luck. Look, it's not something I'm supposed to be talking about with people, so why don't you just let me go and we can go our separate ways. She smirked as she rounded on him again. Not until you say it. Say what? She winced at that before scratching the back of her head in mild embarrassment, making the blonde smirk at that. I guess I never told you to say I'm the best, did I? He arched an eyebrow at that, his jaw slightly agape. You're not all there, are you? She scowled and flicked the bridge of his nose, not the thing to say to the woman who's got your life in her hands. Not much of a life. Her eyes narrowed at that as he let out a sigh. Fine, you win, you're the best, now get me out of this hole. She grinned and leaned in before sticking a finger in her mouth. After a moment she pulled it out and stuck it in his ear. Wet willy. Running through a few hand signs, she grabbed him by his ponytail and gave a sharp tug, pulling him from the ground with a yelp of pain. After a moment of rubbing his ear and mumbled a thanks and moved off to get some lunch before finding another training ground. Several minutes later he wheeled and jabbed a finger into the woman's chest. Why the hell are you following me? Anko shrugged, her ever-present smirk widening a bit. Boredom mostly. Are you going to tell me why you were in my forest? Are you going to tell me why you're dressing like a hooker? It took him a few minutes to pull himself out of the wall. Kid, you have a lot to learn about talking to women if you ever want to meet a girl. When I meet one I'll let you know. He grinned and managed to sidestep her punch. See what I mean? She growled as she caught him by the collar and pulled him close. You'd better think twice about fucking with me, you little shit. His own scowl seemed out of place with his smile. What was I thinking? Dinner first, right? So where to? Anko jerked back from the blonde as though she had been burned. Was he actually playing her game? And winning? Jay, just leave me the fuck alone. He could feel Shiori pulling at his mind a bit, trying to get him to leave the woman alone, but he was still riding high on his anger and simply tuned her out as he purred. You were following me, he behind. Naruto felt his blood run cold as Anko looked on him in a mix of fear and revulsion before she simply vanished, a swirl of leaves the only evidence she was there. Did I miss something? Naruto, if you had just listened, I was trying to tell you she was more like you than you know. Moving towards the raiment stand, he decided to press further. What do you mean, Shiori-chan? She's nothing like me. Ever wonder why you haven't really seen her around? Why the only times you do is when she is bloodied and heading back into the forest? He gave a half shrug at that. At the time he was more concerned with not being found. Naruto, I think you scared the hell out of her when you called her bluff. She must use that like you used that idiot facade. His eyes widened at that. He had been called on it once and had ran like hell from the person, his Ajiji. Now he had done the same to this woman and smacked his head as he let out a groan. Shit, Shiori-chan, what should I do? I'd go see the old monkey, see what he can tell you about her, then get her something to make up for it. He gave a nod and, deciding to put off his lunch, made for the tower. Anko was sitting in one of the tower windows with her knees pulled up to her chest as she glared out at the village, the buildings alight with the brilliant orange flames of a fading sun. It wasn't fair, it wasn't her fault that her sensei had taken those kids, had done those experiments, hell, she was a victim as much as any of them, so why the hell was she blamed, why was she hated? Letting out a tired sigh, she moved through the levels of the tower, absently cursing that she had come off so harsh to the boy who had just been sitting outside the fence. He wasn't even looking at the forest, and yet she had felt the urge to drive him away, anything to keep that sliver of privacy, than to have it turn out to be the kid. The one that had the Sandame's ear, his golden boy, the one he let to face the Hokage monument. Hell, some whispered that he had asked the boy to do that. She was screwed. Humming to the main landing and moving further in, past the arena and the dormitory, she came to what looked to be an empty section of wall, one that didn't stay that way. Calling forth a small snake, the little reptile moved along the floor into what looked to be a small bit of damaged plaster. A few moments later the wall section receded before moving aside and to show another staircase, one that seemed to vanish into inky blackness. The violet-haired girl let out a heavy sigh as she dismissed her snake and descended into the depths of the tower's underground. Back in the time of the Second Shinobi War, this tower had been a vital post due to its defensible location and commanding view. Now it was largely left to languish, save for the few times it had served as the goal for the Chunin exams. Now, it was hers. Or at least she considered it to be. Well, she had an apartment in town not too far from the central market street. It wasn't home to her. This place had been. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, she followed the corridor with practiced ease despite the dark. This had been her home for 3 years. Light was often a luxury here, as her mission pay didn't cover power to keep the whole of the tower lit. Not for the first time she cursed the fact that the electricians ignored her calls. Some because channeling a bit of chakra into one of the few E-class jutsu she had bothered to learn, she conjured a small flame to her fingertips, giving little more light than a match, but it would do. A carefully honed habit of checking all the small antichimers took only a few minutes with some chakra shunted to her nose, making her almost as good as an Inuzuka for a time. It was a trick learned from her friend Hana and had saved her skin more than a few times. Moving back to the main hall, she made her way along to what at one time had been the outpost commander's office. She'd heavily modified the room, of course. No longer did it have the central stone desk, something that could be used for cover should the need arise, but it was an eyesore and she needed the room for her bed. While she wouldn't be considered lazy by any of her peers, she did like to take it easy, and one of her favorite pastimes had been simply lounging and reading in the large 4-poster bed. She had seen the design in a book when she was younger, and it was one of the few things that her bastard teammates had given her that she had held onto. She was under no illusion why she was given the bed. They were hoping she would invite them over to try it out. She didn't miss them. She had heard that one of them had gone on to become a personal tutor for some of the more spoiled villagers, the other had been killed in a spying mission to Kiri. Fool had tried to infiltrate the rebel camps when he had been caught by none other than the demon of the bloody mist. There wasn't much left. Still, it was a nice bed. One that loved and tended to like a child. The rest of the room was unique, to say the least. On the far wall, opposite of the door, was a large full-length aquarium that had been sectioned out for her snakes. Not too far from it was her work table, then her desk. The pair of rather shoddy workbenches served as the platform from which she had concocted her poisons and anti-venoms that she preferred to use. Her bed had 4 nightstands, one at each corner, each holding small lamps, assorted books, scrolls and a few pictures. One of her parents holding her when she was a baby, shortly before their death at Iwa's hands. They were no ninja, just merchants that couldn't afford protection during the war. She was the result. Brought up on the perfect dogma of serving your village, protecting the people. What rubbish. The day her sensei had gone rogue was the day it all ended for her. Her friends, save Hana and Kurenai, all abandoned her. Her former teammates shunned her. Her boyfriend at the time left her after one last shot at getting into her pants. She wasn't the type of girl to ever let a man hit it and quit it when it came to her and hers. It was one reason she was always talking with Kurenai about Asuma. He was a nice guy and all, but her instincts were telling her to keep a close eye on the man. She may not have had many people in her life, but she would be damned if she let any of them get hurt for the sake of a night of fun. One of the many reasons she was rather discouraged from going with them on ladies' nights. Not that that stopped her. Taking a moment to shed her coat, she tossed it onto her desk before plopping onto the bed, falling back to rest her head on her arms, her mind drifting back to the blonde she had encountered. It was odd, there was no denying that. She knew better to react like that, but when she saw him sitting there, channeling that strange chakra like that, she had simply reacted and was now praying for a light punishment. However, she couldn't lie to herself about her odds. She had seen firsthand what would happen to those that wronged the boy. Hell, she'd done many of the things herself, being one of the better interrogators of the Anbuti and I Center. Visions of a bloody end were cut short as a brilliant blue light on the wall began to flash. Bolting upright, the young woman sped through the halls like a shot. The blue light meant only one thing. Someone had breached her tower. Using a pillow of chakra to quiet her steps, she streaked up the stairs toward the top of the tower. It was the only place that someone could easily get in when she was there, but the single path down into the main structure ensured that whoever was there would be a sitting duck. Slinking up the last few sets of stairs, drawing on all her knowledge of stealth and tracking, she summoned up a set of snakes to lead the way, 2 quick hand signs, and her vision faded somewhat to be replaced with a kaleidoscope of color. She cursed silently at her choice of snake, it always took a minute to get used to heat-based vision. Her mind clearing a bit, she was confused to see someone simply standing out in the observation deck, looking back over the village not unlike she had been. The rapidly cooling night gave her a sharp contrast for making out the male who looked to be clutching something to his chest. Taking a moment to stop her technique, she peered cautiously around the corner, only to have her eyes widen. It was the blonde brat from before, and, if smell was anything to go by, he had dango. Naruto didn't really know what had happened. All he knew was that 1 second he was looking at the village in the growing twilight, suddenly he was on the icy stone floor, looking up at a vision of loveliness in fishnet, digging through the package he had brought. Well, guess I got the right house. Shiori simply giggled in the recesses of his mind as he waited a few moments for the girl to notice him and get up. No dice. Letting out an annoyed sigh, he made a quick clone and substituted himself with it before standing over her, tapping a foot in annoyance. After a squeal of joy echoed through the small room and Naruto now struggling to catch the now tossed aside container, she looked up at him, then down at her seat, who was grinning up at her, his hands behind his head. Don't get up on my account, I'm loving the view. Anko took a moment to look from blonde to blonde, then at her own lack of dress and growled. Naruto winced as she put a kunai through his groin before his eyes widened in shock. Holy hell. She looked at him in confusion for a moment before he formed another clone and sent it off into the woods, followed quickly by another who had simple orders. Hide and seek. What the hell are you doing? Shushing her for a moment, he looked out at the forest intently before his body flinched suddenly and let out a whoop of joy. Damn. I know what they know. She stared at the blonde for a solid minuet before laughing aloud at the now pouting boy. Oh my god, that's priceless. The only genin I know that can lean an A-class jutsu, and you screw it up. Well, excuse me, I didn't have the luxury of time when I was reading the damn thing. You're welcome by the way, and sorry. She looked at him in confusion for a moment, then back at the dumplings. Shrugging, she popped one of the sticks into her mouth, mumbling around the savory treat. What for? She was more than a little surprised to see sad blue eyes rise to meet hers from their once downcast state. For anything I said earlier, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Naruto's unease rose to blind panic as the kunoichi began to choke on a dumpling. A few sharp slaps to her back helped dislodge the wayward food as she took in great lungful of air. Damn it, kid, don't do that. Sorry. She growled a bit and snatched another stick of dango from the box. And stop apologizing all the time, you'll make me think you don't mean it. We had a fight, you beat me at my own game, I couldn't take it. Story done. Pulling his own box from the rather mangled sack, he produced a large bowl with a paper seal covering it. A sharp poke from a chopstick caused the paper to go up in a cloud of ash, leaving a bowl of pristine ramen. Still, I felt bad, figured a bit of food could help make up for it. She absently waved him off, making him a bit uneasy with the way she was gesturing with the dango stick. I told you, brat, the story's done. Taking a moment to absently swirl his noodles, he took a steadying breath. Don't. She arched an eyebrow at him. Don't want. Taking a bite of the noodles and using opportunity to sort out his thoughts. Don't call me that. A person I trust more than anything told me we were a lot alike, and I think she was right, so let's make a deal. No games. I'll be around if you need anything, you do the same, alright? No games, no lying, no insults. Not for the first time today the blonde had knocked her off her game. She fought the urge to lash out at the boy once more, but still, her body was shaking with barely contained rage. This little shit had the gall to come into her home and ask that. As she was about to lay into him, intent to drive him off again, she caught the look in his eyes, the blue pools making her stop short. Before, his eyes had looked full of fire, defiance, courage, and not a small amount of cockiness. Now they looked wrong. Now the stormy blue seemed to only have an emptiness, one she knew too well in her time. Dropping back to the ground limply with a teen, she let out a tired sigh, sending a small smile his way and extended her hand. Deal. Alrighty, first a bit of backstory here. The world of BioShock has been called steampunk by many. I don't know how they get that, but in my mind it's more of a 50s never-ended kind of place. BioShock itself takes place in a city known as Rapture. What's unique about this place? It is built on the bottom of the freaking Atlantic. Yes friends, the whole game you are in an underwater 50s era, New York-styled city. Now, this city was founded by a man that had grown to hate the way he saw the world turning, where a scientist couldn't actually create anything unless it was carefully regulated, studied and patented to make some kind of profit. Where an artist was censored or hated for what they may create, where a writer would have his or her books burned. No, he envisioned a city where the work was its own reward. So he built this place, hidden from the world where people that had like minds could come and live, create and prosper, simply for the sake of prosperity. Now, one of the early inventions in the city was a substance known as Atom. I don't think they ever say what it stands for, but yeah, as it is described at one point in BIO2, Atom is a genetic sludge that is, in essence, the building blocks of all life. With the right tweaking here and there of the substance, then you can create a number of effects in a person, effects that can be overwritten or even chosen between naturally in your body. Some of these came to be known as plasmids, others were gene tonics. The plasmid manifests physically with visible changes and effects to the body, hands, in the game, the stuff is literally injected into you, and after that you just cycle through them like changing weapon in any shooter. In each game the first one you come across is lightning, letting you shoot out a bolt of electricity at the target to do minor damage and stun them until they are hit again, unless they are standing in water, then it will hit many folk and fry them, not sure why they made it do more damage in that instance in the game, but they did. Now a gene tonic is something a bit different, these changes are not as obvious, and in terms of the game is really just to customize your play style, want to be a better hacker. There's a tonic for that now in terms of story, this is where things started to go bad for folk. Taking the tonics, and Atom, in of itself, is like a drug. If you know you are going to play football later on and want an edge, you take an endurance tonic. But then you have your math test, better pop an intellect one. You can see how it can get out of control. Now, as those of you who have taken biology may know, changing genetic information like that is bad. In the game people started to mutate wildly, mostly just becoming deformed, but the addiction to Atom was so great that many went insane and started attacking others. Now, to help try and combat these people, one of the project's chief researchers altered some of the city's children, specifically little girls. If they told you why, I don't remember. I need to go back and play the first BioShock again. These girls ended up being called Little Sisters and were small enough to squeeze through the city's ventilation systems. Their tasks were to gather Atom from dead enemies, known as splicers, and return with the samples in hopes of finding a way to combat the mutations and the addiction. Their bodyguards were modified men known as Bid Daddies and were originally tasked with repairing and expanding the city as they were permanently sealed into deep-sea diving suites, the old spun copper-style suites. Now in terms of gameplay, the best way to get Atom for yourself was to find these little sisters, kill the daddies, and then either save or harvest the sisters. Harvest and you get more Atom and start down the bad story ending, save them for less, but then the sisters reward you later with gifts for saving them. In Bio 2 you actually are one of the big daddies this time, one of the earlier series of them, they were faster, more intelligent, but had a bad habit of getting too attached to their sisters, and if anything happened to them, you either A, went mad, B, died, or C, went into a coma until you could be reunited with yours. So they phased your series out. In the game your sister is taken from you and you're trying to get her back, now 10 years later. Now you encounter a new problem. The first little sisters are all grown up and are a pain to fight. They are damn strong, fast, and will drain Eve from you. Eve is like mana, it powers your plasmids. Your sister is now grown too, but the new head of the city has plans for her and you have to save her. Depending on what happens in the game you get one of 4 endings. 2 bad and frankly, freaky, one that is bloody sad and one that is good, but still, not that good. The good ending is the one I got on my playthrough and is the one I based the story after. Now in Rapture there are a few times that you step out of the city and have to go building to building through airlocks, while doing this you can find Atom slugs. In the game's info section they mention that they tried to cultivate Atom and the slugs as they are very simple creatures and didn't have much mobility. In my story I had it where Shiori and the other Biju were animals that mainlanders tried to use to farm Atom with limited results. Anyway, the rest is hinted at and will be explained in the actual story, and I don't think I can say more without giving away the games themselves. If you don't care, PM me and I'll tell you, or go online and read the spoilers, but I don't want to jack up the game for anyone else, so yeah. There are others, but I never got them in the game, so I'm leaving them out of the listing for now. If you really want to see one I don't want to use or didn't list, then PM me and let me know. I'm pretty easygoing. Now for the girls. As stated, Shiori is in. In terms of her body she's not some overly buxom girl like some make her out to be. She modeled her body off of your little sister in the game, who is anywhere from 16 to 18, they never really specify. She has a slight build, willowy you may say, something of an Hercules figure, but still in the young teen stage of development. Do no freakishly huge Tsunade style things that are twice the size of her head, I really dislike that in stories. Now in the story Shiori's body is a bit more developed, so maybe a solid C, as the sister was older when Shiori knew her. Still, not so freakishly over the top. Anko is in, already had that decided, now for the last part. I put forth the option of either Tei or Mei and asked for options in the reviews and PMs and I got a lot of them, some came with great suggestion as well as to how to work them in or give them a common background. I'm taking the suggestion from a friend of mine and I'm going to run with it. However, the issue arose in the fact that my votes came down to a dead, freaking, tie with the two of them. So I will say now, I will have 4 girls for our hero, something I've never written before Shiori's made her call, now they are just both getting used to the idea. Groundwork is being laid for Anko. May will come in about the time of wave, not as soon as you may think, as I'm going to go into some of the D ranks to help build Naruto's power up, and Taiya will probably join around the time of the Chunin exams, rather than later on, with interplay with Kin who I will be having live. I should have stayed in bed, I should have fucking stayed in bed. Naruto dove between a set of downed logs just in time to have a brace of shuriken miss his rear. Prime or rookie? Your tears taste like candy. Naruto cursed Nunta quietly as he jagged behind a tree, leaving a field of cyclone traps in his wake, praying they would slow the woman down enough to let him have a moment to think. And it had started so innocently too. Last night the duo had shared a nice meal, talked about things they enjoyed, really enjoyed, not the foolish bits they claimed to like, in order to put people at ease, or in Anko's case, on guard. He had found out that the young woman was a special joinin that enjoyed tea ceremonies, something she would venomously deny if he told anyone, before his slow death in the belly of a snake. She had found out that, contrary to many beliefs, he only liked ramen, but that his favorite food had been rabbit, something he had been introduced to at a young age due more to necessity than anything else. He found out that, indeed, her favorite food was dango, mainly due to the fact that it was the special treat they would get in the orphanage when she was young if they were good, something that had stayed with the woman all her days. She had discovered that the rumors had indeed been true, that the Hokage had been giving the young man his missions to prank and test his own forces, with somewhat troubling results. She had known that Anbu was a bit lacking, but to be unable to catch an academy student who had just paint-bombed your own headquarters, well, said student was talking to the guards not good. He discovered that, while she did find them useful, she absolutely loathed snakes, that her summons only grudgingly obeyed her, and that she preferred to use them simply for venom production, that in the extra scratch she made from selling anti-venom to the hospital. After their brief chat the two decided that they would make this something of a habit, meeting at her dango shop to talk and in general, be able to hang out without the masks, something she didn't even really get to do even with her best friend Kurenai, as the girl had her own mask to keep up as the Ice Queen of Konoha. As he left he had absently mentioned something about needing to train in the morning, and that had led to Anko offering to supervise. He wanted to find the person that invented the phrase sounds good and commit an unspeakable act on him or her. Now he was enduring what she had generously called training. Mainly, it consisted of him running for his life while she threw weapon at him and threatened to do things to his manhood that he would rather forget. However, for all the fear of the moment, he had to admit he was having fun with her. Well, this wasn't the first time that someone had offered to train him, until Iruka got out of the hospital, this was the only person to ever actually train him. So despite trying to dive and cover his little buddy every half a second, he was happy, something that Anko seemed to feel as the pair worked. After several long hours a battered and slightly bleeding blonde was dragged by one foot over to a nearby tree. Not too bad kind, not too bad, I don't think I got a single one of them to stick, now take 5, then we will pick up the weapons and see about lunch. Naruto looked up at the sky in surprise to see that, indeed, it was close to noon, something he had failed to notice. His morning had begun some 7 hours ago, and it looked like his day was still far from over. Taking time to get his ragged breathing under control, he took a swig of water before looking to the woman at his side. Anko-sensei, yesterday when we fought, what was that thing that I ended up destroying? She arched an eyebrow at that. What, a mud clone? It's something that snake fucker taught me, they're pretty useful, well they don't transfer memories like your shadow clones, but they can take a hell of a beating. Every time it looked like you were going to land a good one I substituted myself, and a mild hinge made sure you thought you were doing well. The look of confusion passed over his features, but if you were that mad at me, then why not just go for the kill? She let out mirthless chuckle at that, my sensei. He always taught us to play with our prey, try and get them to give up information or tire them out to capture, it's second nature to me now. She gave a half shrug as he nodded, then pulled himself to his feet. Well then, let's go get those weapons of yours, I'm getting hungry. With a nod the purple-haired woman rises once more before the pair head off into the woods. Things had been slow going for Iruka Yamino. He was thankful for that. After the events of that night he was looking forward to a simple month of barking at Naruto and making his days something he would regret. Everyone had to have their own little revenges after all. But for now, while he may hate hospitals, having spent far too much time in them for his taste, he was enjoying it, nothing to do but sit back and think about what he would teach the young genin hopeful. He knew that his abilities could at best be considered limited, but he still felt he had a lot to offer outside of the classroom. While he may have only excelled at stealth and tracking, that, in his mind, is what a ninja really was. Many enjoyed the big flashy techniques, like summoning or fireballs, but for him, it was the rush of sneaking past the whole of a battalion to kill their general, before slipping away once more like a fleeting shadow on a wall. Yes, that was a ninja. Summoning had its uses, fireballs too, the list went on. But really, if you are forced into situations where you must go head to head against superior forces like that, then you have done something wrong. Either you had been compromised or you were lacking in skills and needed to train. While he knew that Naruto was top-notch in the field of stealth, there was always room to improve. Naruto could hide with the best of them, but the way he was always shocked when he had managed to find him told him where he needed help. Tracking and sensing, and while he may not have been the best sensor, he had a feeling that Naruto would have a knack for it. After all, you didn't spend that much time running and reading people and not develop a good sense of it. As he was coming up with a unique variation of hide and seek to use the sound of footfalls from outside the room, made him perk his ears before he let the feel of the person's chakra wash over him. He smiled. Two quick knocks followed by his greeting echoed through the room before the door opened to reveal someone that made Iruka blink a few times in shock, his mouth agape. "Why Yamdame-sama?" A somewhat deeper than normal voice echoed through the room for a moment before the figure strode towards him. That's when he spotted it, the 3 whisker marks that adorned each cheek. "Close, Iruka-sensei, but I'll tell you now, I'm going to be better than my dad ever was." It took a moment for what the young man was saying to really sink in. This was the 4th son. I see Naruto, I don't know how I didn't see it before. He laughed again as he sat his little bundle on the bedside table. "Yeah, well, it's understandable, I did look a lot different even just a few days ago." But he did, gone was the little pipsqueak that had been the shortest in the class. Now the young man was standing at 5'6" and had put on a surprising amount of muscle from the looks of it. Then again, that old outfit of his did hide his body quite well from others. His current seemed to do the exact opposite, showing just how much the young man had changed inside. "So I take it you won't be hiding your skills anymore, then, eh?" Naruto tilted his head slightly at that. "What do you mean, sensei? You told me yourself a ninja is based on deception." He smirked at that. "True, but I just thought that with such showy clothing that you would be changing is all." Naruto waved him off as he reached into the box he had brought in and produced a bowl of ramen and passed it to his teacher, who took it with a wide grin. This man was the true ramen freak and Naruto by association. "The way I figure it, if I can hide that well in orange, then white will be that much harder. That and I was given all these muscles, may as well show them off a bit." "Oh man, sensei, you should have seen the looks I was getting in town." For a moment Iruka had to fight off the sense of dread he had felt well up at those words, but seeing Naruto's smiling face allayed his fears a bit. "Oh? What happened?" Naruto snapped his own chopsticks before gesturing with them. "Girls were blushing at me. I've never had that happen unless I was raiding their bedrooms or something." The Chunin choked slightly on his noodles at that. "Naruto, I trust you weren't doing anything bad in those rooms, were you?" Naruto shot him a withering glare. "Iruka, what do you take me for?" He let out a sigh of relief. "Of course I was doing something bad. What else do you call a paint bomb?" Now the teacher really was choking. A few sharp raps from Naruto helped clear that up, however. He laughed lightly at that before shifting topics. "Well then, Naruto, other than ramen runs, what have you been up to?" He gnawed on a chopstick for a moment before smiling. "Well, I got new clothing and food from the shops. Most still haven't figured out it's me, but by the time they do I'll be set, I think. I figured out the trick to Kage Bushin and have been using it to further my training. I can show you later if you want. I got into a fight with a special jonin and she helped me train this morning. I found out who my dad is, but I'm not really supposed to tell people, so keep it to yourself, okay? I still don't know about my mom, but I have scrolls from them in my room. I'm just a little nervous to open them." "Wait, what? A fight with a jonin?" Naruto quickly shoveled down some of the noodles hanging from his mouth. "Like I said, I got in a fight. She said I was too close to her forest, you know, the fenced-in one. Well, after a fight she followed me for a while, then I kinda pissed her off and she left. I found where she lived later and apologized with, well, food. Then we just talked for a while." This seemed to catch the young teacher off guard. "Oh? Naruto going after an older woman, what would Sakura think?" Now it was Iruka's turn to pat the kid on the back. "What? No way, Iruka-sensei, she may be nice and all, but she's no Sakura-chan. Sakura-chan has the beautiful pink hair and amazing eyes and that pretty face, and she's smart too. Way smarter than anyone else. Anko's nice, but also a little scary. Her hair's kinda crazy and her eyes kinda remind me of the Hyuga in a way, but she's really strong and has been helping me with my speed and dodging a lot." Then Iruka had long since tuned the boy out as he was too busy trying to get his brain up and running again. Naruto Uzumaki was training no befriending Anko Mitarashi. "Iruka-sensei, hello. You still in there?" He shook himself from his stupor before turning serious eyes to his friend. "Naruto, I want you to be careful around Mitarashi-san." At his questioning look he pushed forward. "Did she tell you who her teacher was, what they did?" Iruka had been many things in his life, some happy, mostly sad moments. But he can honestly say he had only been punched like that once before in his life. Iruka held his throbbing jaw and looked at Naruto in shock as the boy's bangs partially hid his eyes that were burning with cold fury. "Iruka-sensei, you disappoint me. The Chunin looked at the blonde in shock, his words were spoken with such a harshness he didn't think he's ever heard that from someone before. Anko-san and I are a lot like Iruka-sensei, she's been put through hell almost as badly as I have, and that's saying something. The Chunin winced, all because of what her teacher did. The old man told me all about her when I was asking where she lived. Orochimaru had kidnapped 12 children from the orphanage, killing the matron in the process, but the intent to experiment on them, trying to generate bloodlines or something. Anko was his apprentice at the time and was found a week later, unconscious with almost no memory of her past, only that her sensei, who was more like a father to her, had abandoned her after doing something to her. She doesn't know if she did anything, but she knows without a shadow of a doubt that she wouldn't have hurt the matron. Since then she has been shunned and sent out constantly on missions she shouldn't be able to complete with her skills. Yet she has come back every time. Iruka winced at that, he didn't know she had amnesia of the event. It was assumed among her peers that, as the apprentice, she had had a hand in it. He was cut off as Naruto pressed on, but one thing beyond that caused the teacher's breath to catch. Naruto had a look that was shockingly serious, one that seemed to hold wisdom and intellect beyond his years. It's like with me, Iruka-sensei. She has maybe 4 people, well 5 now, that wouldn't treat her like shit. She tries to scare everyone, like she did with me, to protect herself. I don't know if she did it, but I do know that it's in the past. I can't hate her, she's been nothing but nice to me. Even when she was attacking me, she could have just slit my throat or left me to the tender mercies of the villagers, but she didn't. She lives alone out in the middle of that forest, her own island fortress. It's a lonely life, Iruka, a very lonely life, and I'll be damned if I leave her there alone. Naruto looked up in surprise at his teacher as he felt a hand come to rest on his shoulder. In his eyes was a look of deep pain, one all too familiar to his own and Anko's. You don't have to say any more, Naruto. I judged her without knowing her, but I won't do that again. After all, were your teachers right? I can't very well teach you without getting to know her, now can I? Naruto gave the man a small smile before the two went back to their cooling noodles, each lost in their own thoughts of life and the hardships they had already endured. However, one thought beyond those echoed through Iruka's mind. So this was Naruto, without any masks. Kurenai's day had started out at a rather low point. Early on, while she was trying to get a bit of practice and she'd found her favorite training ground had been staked out by Asuma, the man had been rather pushy with his hints at a date and was starting to grate on her. A quick shunshin and she was gone, sparing herself from the pains of her smoke allergy. Then came the fact that the little restaurant she liked for brunch had been closed for business, citing the need to host an Akimichi function. Then on the way to her backup restaurant, she had gotten one of her bandages snagged on a fruit vendor's cart and very nearly gave the whole of the street a show. The day sucked. Deciding that she needed to find someone to vent on, the brunette changed course and headed for the dango stand. If there was someone that enjoyed a good bitchfest, it was Anko. After several minuets she stepped gingerly into the shop. It wasn't uncommon for one of her many fans to be here, waiting for the off chance that she would come in. Luckily Anko tended to drive them back. Still, she couldn't be sure and she had a rep to maintain. Casting crimson eyes around the store for a moment, she sighted her target and started moving in, only to hear the jonin humming. Taking a moment to ghost up behind her purple-haired friend, she slipped a hand over her eyes, only to feel a kunai at her neck. After a tense moment the pair pulled back and Anko shot her a death glare. Don't do that. She gave a weak laugh as she slipped into a chair next to her friend. Sorry Anko, I was just trying to have a little fun. What going on? I could have sworn you were humming. The special jonin cursed under her breath as she tore into another dumpling. You must be losing it, Kurenai-chan. Me? Humming? Next you're going to tell me that I'll be made a jonin instructor like you just before I put on a dress and go on a picnic. The red-eyed teacher-to-be let out a rather unladylike snort before flagging down a server and putting in her own order of dumplings. Yeah, that's about as likely to happen as me dating Asuma. Anko shuddered at that. The man was a massive closet perv, just like his father. Not that they would ever say anything. So how are things with you? We haven't gotten to talk in like a week. Now this is what Kurenai was waiting for. She started to weave her own tale, embellishing at all the right points and letting Anko drop her own suggestions for torturous revenge. However, she somehow knew that Anko's heart didn't seem to be in it this time, like her mind was somewhere else. Okay, spill it. First you are humming, I don't care what you say, now you are ignoring a good rant about men. What's going on? She gave a half shrug. I don't know, I guess I was just comparing the guy I met to the ones you and Hana always complain about. Anko gratefully took her newly arrived seconds and was about to take her first skewer when she noticed the frozen form of Kurenai and waved a hand before her face a few times. Fatal error in main system, backups coming online. You have one missed message. Would you like to hear it? Anko Midarashi has met a man. The fuck? The sounds of Anko's laughter echoed through the store before Kurenai managed to stomp on her foot, accenting the laughter with a yelp of pain. Sorry Kurenai, but I don't know that I've ever heard you cuss. Was the idea of me meeting a guy that insane? Well, Kurenai didn't see it. Anko felt a bit hurt at that. It wasn't her fault that everyone hated her because of her teacher, and she thought she was pretty hot if she said so herself, so why shouldn't she attract someone? It is a little I've seen you sick your snakes on anything with external pluming every time one of them so much as made eyes at you. So who is he? Anko had to bite back a giggle as Kurenai shifted gears into girl talk mode. It sometimes shocked her at how quickly she could do that. It's not really like that, he's an acquaintance. Met him the other day while he was taking it easy by the forest. Attacked him thinking he was going to go into my territory and we had a fight. What, that's it? Yep. Nah, you're not getting out of that easily. The last person you got into a fight with was Guy when he woke you up from a nap, wanting to borrow one of your snakes, what for only Kami knows, but even then the man had a limp for a week and can't help but flinch every time he hears you coming. Anko had to fight back a giggle at that memory, he had gotten his snake alright, shaking off the memory she pressed forward. Yeah, well Guy didn't try and make up for it later on either, the kid did. Wait, kid. She nodded before taking a draw of her tea, yeah, he'll be put on a genin team in a few weeks. That caught the red-eyed woman off guard. This kid had come back and had the good grace to apologize. Really? A kid that I might be teaching is the guy you met. I didn't think you liked them like young, and he braved your apartment. She put the age thing out of her head for a moment. Nordo wasn't some kid like the others, but she didn't need to know that yet, more fun to drive her nuts. She leaned back in her chair as she shook her head again. Wrong, he braved the tower to apologize, even brought me dango, damned if I know how he found out I liked it though. Kurenai was struck silent for almost a full minuet at that. Wait, you said he's not even a genin yet? She shrugged, yeah, so? Then how the hell did he get through the forest of death? Now it was Anko's turn to stiffen. Just how did he get there? On a good day it would take 3 days to get there from the outskirts, unless he knew the body flicker technique, but she knew for a fact that he didn't. One of the first things she had made him do that morning was show her all the techniques he knew, that was not among them. Well, it looks like Anko had her topic the next time the two got to talk. The past 2 weeks had been interesting for Naruto, to say the least. Not 2 days after their lunch Iruka had been released from the hospital to begin what he had called training. Really, it was nothing more than a series of glorified hide-and-seek games. Something that he had initially laughed at until he was made it for the first time and spent the rest of the day searching for his sensei, only to find him sitting on a stump in the middle of a cleared field. Now he knew how the Anbu felt when he led them on their merry chases. Advanced healing did nothing for a bruised ego. Apparently, according to Iruka, he was quite easy to keep ahead of, primarily because of his massive levels of chakra that he had yet to learn to suppress. He explained to him that the only true way to accomplish this was through careful meditation, searching one's own mind, body and soul for what he had called his chakra heart. According to him it was the central core and generator for one's chakra, and when new chakra was created, it would often pulse, something that others could feel if they were attuned to the sensations properly. So in addition to the new games he was forced to play, he was told that he would have to be sitting in one place for hours on end until he could feel the core, the pulses, and find a way to mute them, something, he said, that was different for every person. And he thought the lectures were bad. To add further insult to injury, it seems that Anko had decided to abandon their little talks and training sessions the very day that he had gone to visit Iruka. At first he didn't think much of it, she was a special jonin after all, he couldn't expect her to spend every day with him, he didn't even blame her for up and vanishing without a trace, assuming that she was out on a mission. What did hurt though was when he had spotted her in the little dango stand she frequented only to have her glare at him before she vanished in a puff of smoke. Now Naruto was sitting on the same stump that he had initially met Anko on, trying work on his chakra control, something that Iruka had been adamant about from day one. Right now he was sitting cross-legged, a series of leaves stuck to his body, while his clones were scattered among the clearing doing the same with blades of grass. He had learned his lesson that day, don't go into the forest of death without permission, and while Anko may have suddenly come to hate him, he wasn't about to do anything that may set her off again. Strange powers or not, she could still beat him like he owed her money. Speaking of his clones and their abilities, he had learned the hard way not to let the clones disperse all at once, first of all, second, they were never allowed to do their own thing. He had learned that each of them would have slightly different quirks, shards of his personality that would somehow intensify when manifested in a clone. Like a child when their parents were no longer around, they would start to test the limits of the rules, as it were. That first day it hadn't been too bad, they were given specific tasks that had taken most of their time and their chakra to accomplish before they dispelled. Naruto, at the time, had been asleep and therefore didn't have to worry as much about the blowback, though he would say that his dreams were strange that night, something about the blonde in his class having latched onto his arm while he was in the bookstore and hitting him with a barrage of questions. Worse still, apparently his attempts to get away from her were seen as playing hard to get or just being shy and only spurred her to further action. He hoped it was just a dream. However, on some level he knew better. Tenton had been little better, sending him strange looks every time he had dropped by to talk and to check on his little project. Apparently, according to Tenton, the blades were coming along well and would be ready in time for him to go back to class, something that actually irked him a bit. He had wanted a chance to practice with them before team placements. However, it was when he was with her that one of his clones had been forcibly dispelled while it was trying to emulate another ninja who was walking up a tree that he realized some of the true potential of his jutsu. Much to Tenton's surprise, he dashed out behind their forge and created a few dozen clones and set them to work trying the exercise again, something that Tenton laughed at first before telling him some of the tricks of the tree walking exercise. He was grateful to her, that was a given, however it was a little disturbing to see his little sis eyeing the clones like that. He knew that look, it was one like Sakura-chan would give Sasuke one. He was more than a little sad to never have her directed him. Shaking himself, the blonde looked inward, seeking out Shiori for a bit more work on his plasmids. That was something that, while slow going, had been more than a little fun for him. I mean, who wouldn't enjoy throwing cyclones all over a field to trap opponents, something that his sensei had learned the hard way one of the few times Naruto had been able to catch him off guard. The former Anbu had never gotten caught in the winds, having seen firsthand how Mizuki had been affected, but it still made it harder on him. Iruka would never say it, but he needed these workouts as much as Naruto did. While Naruto had much to learn, Iruka needed to hone. Slowly Naruto felt his mind clear before opening his eyes to reveal the now familiar sower that would lead him to his Shiori-chan. She wouldn't let him call her anything else, much to his surprise. She had apparently been utterly serious when she had told him that he would be her mate and didn't let a moment pass without reminding him of it in some way. Not that it really bothered him, well they had yet to be able to get truly close because of the cage. They were content with just spending time with each other while she lectured him on the uses of his existing plasmids or when they would discuss the escapades of his clones, something she seemed to enjoy to no end, especially when a few of them decided to hinge themselves back into his old looks and continue his pranking spree. Shiori-chan. Are you awake? His questions was answered by a loud giggle. There he saw Shiori, sitting in the same overstuffed chair that had formed that night, something he hadn't been able to do again, much to their mutual annoyance, watching what looked to be several screens that showed what his clones were doing at that moment. Her ears perked up and swiveled his direction before she turned to give him a soft smile. Dear one, what brings you here at this hour? We normally speak when you are nearing sleep, is everything alright? She shot the screens another glance to make sure she hadn't missed anything, just in time to see a clone dodge behind a fruit stand as a girl with pale blonde hair dashed past, making the fox girl giggle once more. No Shiori-chan, nothing's wrong, I just thought we could talk while I worked on the chakra exercises. Have you made any progress with getting around the seal? Her shoulders seemed to slump at that as she pouted, not as of yet Naruto-kun, your father was a genius when it came to seal arts, and right now there is simply not enough information on the seal to find what we seek. She saw his own rather depressed look before she rose and moved to the bars of the cage, reaching a hand through to take his and give it a comforting squeeze. Don't worry my love, every time we try we learn a bit more, we will find a way, in time. He gave a hesitant nod before leaning against the bars much like she was, his arms coming to snake around her waist and earning him a purr of contentment. I know, it's not fair to you. I want to get you out of here so you don't have to just watch those dumb clones all the time. Again she let out a musical titter. Oh, don't worry about me Koi, your clones are surprisingly entertaining. You were napping in the field when one of your copies stumbled into the hot springs. I don't know what shocked the girls more, your presence or the fact that you popped when they punched you. Naruto let out a groan at that, he thought it was another weird dream that settled it. He was dispelling the stupid things when he decided to sleep. Without his constant mental commands they just seemed to find themselves in more and more trouble, and in the process they were giving him something of a reputation around town. Some saw him as a mysterious shinobi, others as a pervert, and more still as a good Samaritan. Chuckling at his own inner thoughts she decided it was time to change the subject to something she knew had been bothering him. Naruto-kun, why don't you ever talk about that Anko woman? The two of you seem to get along rather well. He let out a sigh as he dropped back into the chair on his side of the bars. Really Shiori-chan, I thought that would be obvious. I don't talk about her because I will likely never see her again. Why do you ask? She gave a half shrug, to be honest. I rather liked her. She was strong and seemed to have much the same pain as you. Why haven't you been to talk to her, seeing as you know where she lives? He gave a half shrug, you don't think that would be a bit much? She might think I'm some kind of stalker, following her out to her house and all. The fox girl smirked at that, you wouldn't be following her, silly, you would simply be dropping in on a friend. He seemed to think for a bit before shaking his head. No, you know as well as I do that she goes to the tower to get away from people. I wouldn't want someone, even Iruka-sensei, to follow me to one of my little hide holes. No, I think if anything I should go to that apparent Jiji told us about, then go from there. She seemed to think for a time before nodding. For once I agree Naruto-kun, it seems our little lessons have not fallen on deaf ears. While he could hear the smile in her voice, he still puffed out his cheeks a bit, wishing to play a bit himself. You know I'll always listen when you speak, Shiori-chan. Anyway, I'll let you get back to your shows, wouldn't want you to miss anything. She giggled again before they exchanged another hug, and she darted in for a kiss on the cheek. Don't be a stranger now. He gave her one of his fox-like smirks. I'd never dream of it. With a last wave to his dream girl, he faded once more, leaving the demon to her own thoughts. Thoughts entered around a certain purple-haired jonin and why she had been avoiding her mate. Anko let out a contented sigh as the cool liquor slid past her lips to blaze a path down her throat. It had been a rough day for her, 13 interrogations, all of them putting up resistance and forcing her to use some of her more creative venoms. Now she was going to have to milk her snakes again to make more. She didn't relish the thought. The pub this night had been her escape, and she was well on her way to making sure she would be late to the office the next day. Not that Ibiki would mind, he himself would do the same after the kind of day she just had. As she was about to sit her drink down, she felt the hairs on her neck rise a bit and cursed. That meant only one thing. Pardon me, miss, I was hoping I could buy you a drink. She didn't so much as spare the man a glance as she raised her glass, showing that she had one. The unknown man gave something of a nervous chuckle, or maybe reimburse you for the one you have. She had to bite back a chuckle at that. That was a pretty good one. Look pal, I'm not really interested, I'm sure there are others you'll have better luck with, so she made a shooing motion. Anko had to bite her tongue to keep from chewing the man out as he settled into the seat next to her. Actually, I think you may be a bit mistaken as to why I wanted to get you that drink, I'm only interested in talking. She normally wasn't one to grind her teeth, but when a guy didn't take the hint. Oh yeah, she would need a bit to keep from grinding her molars flat. She put the glass down none too gently and cursed as her liquor sloshed her head. After shaking the droplets from her fingers, she shot the man a glare, only to have her eyes widen in surprise. She knew that scar anywhere. Iruka. What the hell are you doing here? Isn't it a school night? He smirked a bit at her ribbing before signaling to the bartender and pointing to Anko's drink before showing 2 fingers and grinning. Normally yes, but, as I thought you knew, classes are out right now pending team placements. She tilted her head slightly at that before nodding. Oh I remember the Hokage telling me something about that I would have a shot at taking a team if I really wanted. Iruka's free hand discreetly pinched his thigh to keep from scowling. He was on a mission tonight. Oh, and are you? She gave a half shrug as she polished off her drink, just in time to get the new one that Iruka just seemed to nurse for a moment. I don't know, could be fun to pass on all my little tricks, what do you think? He arched an eyebrow at her, he wasn't expecting that from the woman, honestly. She nodded, making him take a deep draw from his drink, only to cough and sputter before putting it down, setting off a chorus of laughter around him. What the hell was this woman drinking? Anko had her head down on her arms, resting her upper body on the bar, inadvertently giving the young teacher a rather good look at her impressive assets. Oh Kami. That was classic. I knew you were a lightweight, but to choke on the stuff. He scowled a bit before, in defiance, he took the drink and polished the large glass off in one go, making the woman let out a low whistle. Despite his earlier reaction, she didn't see him so much as wobble. Not even Ibiki could slam that swill in one go like that. You wanted my opinion. Right. Part of her shuddered at that, sharply reminded that the man before her was a former Anbu, and judging from his tone, that wasn't a question. She gave a hesitant nod to him, now unsure if she really wanted it or not. Don't. You're not ready. She winced at that before turning back to her drink. Way to sugarcoat it, buddy. He pushed the glass back closer to the bartender before slamming the cash onto the wooden surface as he mumbled to himself. Well, it was soft. Anko picked it up. Long hours listening for half-whispered confessions had made her an expert on picking up what others didn't want to have heard. And I doubt you ever will be if you treat a student like that. Her eyes narrowed dangerously as a hand lashed out of its own volition, catching the teacher by his chunin vest before spinning him around and slamming him against the bar top. And what the fuck is that supposed to mean? If Iruka had been intimidated by the action, he didn't show it, you know what I mean, now let go, Mitarashi-san. Anko scowled, slightly thrown off her game by the man's lack of fear. No, I don't think I do, explain it to me, chunin. His own scowl met hers as she spat out his rank as though it were spoiled milk. You have a student, one you have ignored for the last 2 weeks, if my information is correct. Her grip lessened a bit at that as a look of confusion passed over her features. Student, what student? Before she could so much as blink, she felt the wind leave her lungs as their positions were reversed so fast it had her head spinning, his face dangerously close to hers as he took her coat's collar into calloused hands. Naruto Uzumaki. You short-sighted bitch. While she may have been caught off guard, she wasn't a special jonin for nothing and quickly slipped out of his grasp before dancing back, the other bar patrons forgotten as they were quick to back away. When Anko tended to get in fights, people had a bad habit of being sucked in. The bar's owner had seen it 100 times before. Hey. If you're going to fight, then take it outside. You know the rules here, Anko. She scowled as she leveled an accusing finger at the Chunin. He started it. And I'm finishing it. If you ever want to drink here again, leave. But I he it was him. The barkeep's roar drove over half of the bar into the streets that night. The unlikely pair stood panting just outside of the bar, panting for the sudden, oppressive levels of chakra in the air generated by Third War veteran turned bartender. The pair took a moment to get their breath under control before their fight came back to them, their glares almost arching like lightning between the two. Alright, you crotch stain. What the fuck were you babbling about? I never said I'd train that lying little shit. If anything, Iruka's anger seemed to grow, and what gives you the right to call him a liar? You don't even know him. Despite her anger, she knew better than to let herself blurt out something that would only let him build his case. If she told him just how much she knew about the brat, then he could use it against her. You're right, because the gaki lied to me from the first second I met him. How? What did he say to you that makes you think he did something wrong? He said he was a genin. Of all the things that he had expected her to say, of all the things he could have done, it was his rank. Apparently his look of shock wasn't lost to her, the sheer level of his surprise seeming to diffuse their anger a bit. You think he was lying about being a genin? Well, yeah, he made it into the middle of the forest of death in less than a day. You can only do that if you know the body flicker technique. Anko had to flinch slightly at the vein that started to throb on the teacher's forehead. And you never considered asking him, or even me, his teacher, how he may have done it? Do you know what his nickname is among those that see him as a normal kid? She gave a half shrug, earning her an exasperated sigh. He's the village's #1 unpredictable ninja. So tell me, Jonin, given his skills, how do you think he did it? The purple-haired Kunoichi's eyes narrowed as he threw her rank back at her much as she had done. If I knew that, then we wouldn't be here, now would we? I'll give you a hint. What is the technique that is unique to him? Well, the Kage Bushin no Jutsu. And what is one of the basic required techniques to graduate the academy? Well, the base clone, transformation and the substitution tech. Now you have your information. Put it together. Damn you, Iruka, if I wanted remedial classes I would go with all those snot-nosed little shits. To her surprise, the young teacher laughed long and loud. Well, if you had paid attention the first time around, then you would have figured it out. To her surprise, the teacher made a familiar cross-shaped hand sign before 4 copies of him appeared around her. At once she dropped into the Hebe style, prepared to fight off the former Anbu before they spaced out, 2 jumping to the roof of the bar. Now, little girl, class is in session. At once the clones began snapping through hand signs, each one, including himself, offsetting the series slightly. To her surprise, she felt the chakra flare, then make a tunnel of sorts, the chakra pulling the Chunin and swapping him with one of the clone, before it chained to another clone, then another, until the teacher had been swapped with each clone, ending up on the top of the bar's sign, balancing on the tip of the blade that made up the sign to the Kunoichi's Nadachi. Have we learned anything? Anko's mouth hung limply as she stared at the man above her. The combo was so simple, yet she never would have thought to try it. The snake bastard had showed her team how to use the shunshin as soon as they had the chakra reserves for it, so it had never even occurred to her to try anything like this. It was crude, inefficient, and yet, only a kid could ever think to use it to get around like that. But it would still have taken the clones days to reach the middle of th. Again, the teacher surprised her. 3 of his clones ran to another that quickly cupped its hands and in quick succession sent the 3 skyward. As the first reached the top of his climb, it was grabbed by the second, who quickly spun in midair and sent the clone sailing deeper into the city before doing the same with its brother. While she couldn't see the first land, she could imagine what had happened, another vault ahead even further. Now she felt like a fool. The fool who had, in essence, betrayed the young man who had been nothing but nice to her and who had wanted to be her friend. I am sorry, Iruka. The scared man landed silently next to her, startling her slightly. Anko, I'm not the one you have to talk to. The final week of Naruto's training had to be some of the best he had received in his life, as he didn't say so himself. Not only did he have 2 incredible teachers helping him get to the level that so many of the others had taken for granted, be it in basic academics or the shinobi arts, he was ready, he thought, for anything that could get thrown his way. First, with the use of his clones, he had been steadily moving through a large section of the library, taking on every that was alluded to from his initial run after his changes. Second, his chakra control had been steadily growing, now he could create quite the number of duplicates. However, it was his wasps that showed the greatest improvements, with the increased control and the understanding of how his hives had begun to work. Apparently, according to Shiori, the hives act similar to a mold. If he sent chakra into them, they would produce chakra constructs not unlike his clones. The simple mind of an insect let him control massive numbers of them with a central will, unlike his clones that took on his personality, but still required his orders to know their purpose. He was hoping that he would eventually find a way to relay his clones' orders without having to talk to or see them, but for now, no dice. One of the things that made this last week so much better than the previous two was the simple fact that Anko had returned to their little sessions, spurred on by Iruka's lesson, as well as the fact that when she had swung by her apartment to get her it was a rather enlightening night for the duo, and Naruto came out of it with one thing for certain. He was going to kick Kurenai's ass. If he ever met her or found out what she looked like, in his mind, she had tried to turn his friend against him, something that Shiori somewhat agreed with, as she had instilled the doubt and allowed it to fester. Well, it may not have been attention, she had told him, the damage had been done. With Anko came a great deal of the unique knowledge that she had gained in her assassination missions, the useful, if hated, knowledge from her mentor, as well as the knowledge of how to handle summons and their various jutsu. The training for that week had been pure hell. Anko, wishing to make up for lost time, had created a dozen clones, as had Iruka, and made him send groups off with them to learn potential combos and various uses for the jutsu and plasmids he possessed. However, beyond it all, he thought the most useful lesson had been accidental. He, during one of his spars with Iruka, who had been trying to get him to get the basics of the academy style down before Anko would take over, had overcharged one of his clones, in hope of making one that may survive a few hits and allow him to fool his teacher before setting up an ambush with his swarms. The theory was perfect, the execution not so much. Instead of the chakra reinforcing the outer shell, what was needed to keep them intact, it just built up and waited in the internal. The results were explosive. When Iruka had made a low, slow foot sweep, he had expected the clone to hop into the air, letting him follow up with a simple sidekick, trying to show him the basics of how to counter different reactions to attacks. Instead, he caught the clone behind the knee and sent it crashing to the ground. Immediately Iruka moved into a forward roll, letting the heel of his foot come down on the face of the clone. Iruka wasn't going to look too good for team assignments. The blast had propelled the Chunin into the air almost 20 feet. Anko's comments were less than helpful, though she did point out that it was as powerful as about 2.5 explosive tags. Still, he wondered at what she meant when she suddenly, in a sing-song voice, said so long, and thanks for all the fish. He found out, after bandaging up his father figure, that he had inadvertently recreated the Bunshin Daibakuha, another A-rank technique that, if he had packed more punch to it, can kill a melee attacker quite easily. They had also sat him down and explained that, while his idea for improving the clone was good, it was the inherent balance of the technique. Shadow simply couldn't become hard enough without some form of innate affinity, like the Nara clan possessed, so it would be impossible for him to make a Kage Bushin that could take more hits. The balance of it lay in the fact that other clones wouldn't relay their knowledge to the user. So while the shadow clones were not useful to most ninja for combat, they were invaluable for scouting and recon. Not to mention that the great clone explosion simply couldn't be used with other clones, giving him an ace in some situations. Naruto's rather evil grin gave the pair pause. The shudder going up their spines didn't help much. When asked, if anything, his grin widened. Tell you what, when I take my real genin test, I'll let you watch. Iruka's eyes widened even as Anko winced, the Chunin rounding on her with narrowed eyes. She held up her hands to try and ward him off, but it did little good. That day, for the second time in her life, Anko Mitarashi had been chewed out. Shiori's laughter was the perfect lullaby for the blonde, the ideal thing that allowed him his rest that night, as he had been more than a bit nervous about the next day. Team assignments. For the last few weeks, Ino Yamanaka had been at her wit's end. The reason for her distress was simple enough. There was someone new in town. A very handsome, tall, strong, handsome, shinobi with good fashion sense who had the body of a god. The fact he was good looking was a definitely plus. Not that she was obsessed with looks or anything, never. This man had seemingly come from nowhere one day almost a month ago to take the town by storm. He had apparently been buying up supplies by the wagon full before moving on to the library, only to seemingly vanish from the public eye. She herself had encountered him in the bookstore shortly after his apparent appearance and was frozen in place by what he was doing. He was looking at gardening books. No man like that liked to garden. It was unheard of. Unthinkable. She had to have him. Sosk, for the first time in her long memory, had just been ousted. However, when she had approached him, all he did was give her something of a nervous smile before giving a half wave and heading to the counter, not paying her so much as a second glance. Well, she couldn't have that. When she had hit the street, she managed to spot the long blonde ponytail hopping from rooftop to rooftop and quickly dashed down the street to follow. Not that she was going to stalk him. She just wanted to follow him without anyone else noticing for as long as she could, so that she could learn everything about him and make him hers. Nope, not stalking at all. Days passed for the young blonde, and much to her cringe, she had seen the older man meeting with what was considered to be the bane of every student in the academy's existence. Naruto Uzumaki. The event in question had been about a week after her initial encounter with the man. She had seen him almost literally running into the shrimp outside of the little ramen stand that Naruto was known to frequent and thought that she was going to be in for a show, that the man would simply brush the boy off or berate him as she had seen any of the other adults or older teens do. But to her surprise they had danced around each other to avoid the impact and entered sloppy fighting stances before grinning in startlingly similar fashions, wave at one another and part. Looking back, they could have been brothers. But that was silly, Naruto didn't have any family, he was an orphan. Hell, most people in the village couldn't stand to be around him for more than a minute, surely any family he would have had would have ditched him years ago. Nope, it had to be that the mysterious stranger was just so kind-hearted that he would be nice to anyone, even the dead last failure of the village. That had to be it. In the next week she had gotten some interesting rumors that the teen had been seen a few times with some of the jonin of the village, including her own teacher Iruka sensei. Apparently the two had been training rather extensively in some of the various grounds to the point of exhaustion in some cases before parting or occasionally heading to the ramen stand. She started making it a habit each day to make a circuit of the training grounds each day in an attempt to catch the pair at work. She had to admit, in her younger days she had given the odd glance at her scared teacher. Why, if it wasn't for his abysmal hairstyle and his choice of clothing, she may have had a storybook crush on her teacher, but his insistence on looking like Shikamaru had put that out of her mind almost at once. Thought, when she looks back, maybe Shika started wearing his hair like that for a reason. Nah, she had found the duo on her second day of searching and was surprised to see the pair, of all things, playing hide and seek. She remembered the days of her tender youth when she would do the same with all the local kids before she had met her now rival-in-love Sakura, but if anything, it looked as though these two were taking it almost deadly serious. Kunai and Shuriken coming into play every time one would happen on the other as they made mad flights back to safe points or to slink back into the shadows in order to keep the chase going. This is where she got yet another surprise. The blonde had apparently been able to make solid clones. Oh. Praise Kami, her new man was at least a chunin. Daddy would be so proud. As she watched she saw how the blonde would be easily outmaneuvered by the older man, only for the chunin to come up short as the blonde vanished in a puff of smoke, the battle drifting back and forth not unlike the tides before they would call it quits on their game and start in another area, be it chakra control, taijutsu or practice with throwing weapons. It was strange, it was almost as though her teacher were training the man, but that couldn't be. She knew for a fact that only those that were at least a genin would start learning the solid clone techniques, and even then they could normally make only one. She had seen the team make at least 20 in a single go. So what the hell was going on? Deciding that she had to know, she waited in ambush one day for her fellow blonde, and when he had ducked between a set of stores she pounced. And oh, how it all went wrong. She had made to leap onto the blonde's back to hang from his shoulders, as she had done with her father and, occasionally, Sosk, but the reaction she had gotten from the teen was the last thing she expected. In a moment that had her head spinning and her hair blinding her, he had gone into a forward roll, taking her with him and grinding her painfully into the cobblestone street before he leapt back to his feet and wielded kunai in one hand and, strangely, his left encased in wind, his eyes wild as he looked about for other would-be attackers before looking down at her and scowling. The look was so cold that it made her shiver, his ocean blue eyes meeting her sky blues. The normally warm eyes when he looked at Iruka were cold and dead things, promising pain and suffering. What do you want, Yamanaka-san? Fighting the chill that was trying to crawl its way up her spine, she rose slightly to a crouch, wincing a bit due to the pain dancing through her from her unexpected fall. I was just trying to surprise you. I wanted to get to know you better. If anything, he looked a bit colder at her. Strange, do you make it a habit to jump on other strangers as part of your attempts? Well no. Do you make it a habit to jump on strangers who also happen to be ninja? Does that seem wise? That gave her pause. She knew better than to try that with someone like her father's coworker, the man with all the scars on his head from no. Then tell me, Yamanaka-san, what would possess you to try that with me? She averted her eyes from the teen, trying to save a bit of her dignity after he had so thoroughly put her in her place. I don't know, I thought most guys would like a pretty girl jumping on them. She had meant it to be a joke, but the heavy frown that now adorned his chiseled features made her shrink back a bit. Seeing her pull back in fear seemed to make him deflate a bit, a heavy sigh coming from him as he returned his kunai to its holster. You've known me for a long time, yet you don't actually know me at all, do you? Her head cocked slightly as she tried to make sense of what she had just heard. She knew him. There was no way. She would have remembered someone like him being around the village. However, before she could search her memories further, the blonde had turned on his heel and had tried to leave. She had moved before she herself had even realized it, trying to catch the enigma before he could make good his escape. That was her downfall. She hadn't checked her momentum properly, and he had been tired from a long day of training. The result being him being caught unprepared as she had made another tackle of sorts and sent him careening into a wall, right through it, into the women's hot spring. The pair came up sputtering only to both freeze and give a slow turn, the feeling of dread almost palpable as they came face to well with the current residents of the spring. The gathered women were looking down at the blondes in shock that was quickly being replaced with rage. They could see that one was rather clearly a male, but they were somewhat thrown off by the fact that he looked to be just as mad as they were as he glared daggers at the girl who had fallen in with him. "Now look what you did, you blonde ditz." Her surprise at the whole situation was quickly replaced by the righteous fury that all the Amanaka women were known for. "Blonde ditz. Blonde ditz. Think genius. You're blonde too. Yeah. But I'm not a ditz. Yeah, well, I'm not the one about to get beat, now am I? If there were any justice in the world, yes. I'm only going to get murdered because my plumbing's on the outside." That seemed to give all involved a pause, they hadn't thought of that one before. Apparently it wasn't his fault, the girl wasn't bothering to deny it, and the male wasn't looking, he had only gotten one eyeful before rounding and starting the fight with the girl. Not that that was going to save him, but it did give them pause. Oh please. Women aren't so quick to judge. The slack-jawed, cockeyed look the man gave her almost made her break out laughing. He raised one hand and pointed behind him to the women who were standing with towels covering their forms. "Ladies, who is about to die here?" 3 clearly female voices came back. "You. Right, and what will you do to her, who tackled me into here?" 2 of the women glanced at one another in thought, but the third had no such qualms. "I'll probably get her a towel." The defense rests. Judgmental pricks who covet a double standard. The wave of doom washing over him would have been enough to kill a lesser man. That's it. The teen turned, his eyes firmly squeezed shut as he stood bolt upright and saluted. "I regret nothing." Ino winced as the fists and feet impacted him, 2 kicks to the groin and 1 solid haymaker to the jaw. However, to their mutual shock the young man had simply stood and taken the hits, not so much as cringing as he was lifted 2 feet into the air from the kicks, only to vanish in a puff of smoke. Across town, one Naruto Uzumaki sat bolt upright from his nap in the training field with a squawk of pain, absently curling into a ball as he remembered the blows to his tender areas. That's it, no more octopus ramen before naps. Naruto made his way to the Hokage tower, knowing from experience that on important days like this, that the Hokage would already be at the office, intent in making a good start and double-checking all his work in forming the teams, in this instance, so that things would go smoothly. The blonde had just entered the office, stopping for once to announce himself before he grinned at the old man behind his desk. "Morning, old man. How goes it?" He gave a slight shrug and a chuckle. "It goes, Naruto, it goes. Now to what do I owe the pleasure this morning?" He gave a half grin as a hand came back to scratch at his head. Well, I was wondering, how were we going to swing this?" "Swing this?" You know, he gestured to himself, making the Hokage stare at him in a moment in confusion before it dawned on him. "Ah yes, your sudden change. I suppose the easiest way would simply to remain under your henge. Then once you are put on team, I will have the Jonin order that your squad dispel any illusions they may have in place. As to why you are wearing it, say it was an order from me, due to your resemblance to the 4th. Naruto simply stared at the old man for a moment, as though that was one of the dumbest things he had ever heard. "Then what should I say? I do look like my dad after all, they can't find out." Sarutobi simply smirked as he laced his fingers before him, partially hiding his features from the teen. "Simple, that's what S-rank secrets are for. Don't worry, Naruto, I'll have it all under control." "Does my sensei know?" "Not as of yet, in fact I'm rather looking forward to seeing the look on his face." Naruto bit back a chuckle at the evil look on the elderly leader's face. It was times like this, he was reminded who it was that helped him get his start in pranking. Alright, can't refuse the elderly's whims now, can I?" "You better believe it, Buster." His wild smirk really was the blonde's downfall this time as they shared a hearty laugh. After a few moments of basking in the mirth, the Hokage leaned a bit forward. "Now tell me, Naruto, how is your training progressing? Are you better able to handle your what were they, plasmids?" "Yes." The teen nodded before letting the wind manifest on both arms, then the hives. "You bet, old man, looks like all I had to do was shunt some of Shiori-chan's power to the other parts of my body while focusing on my abilities. Nothing new has manifested yet, but I think some more of her body enhancements have been activating. I notice that I don't need to eat as much now and still have enough energy to just go and go, but if I do eat like I normally do then my strength can be a lot more explosive. It's pretty cool. And these will still be passed on, yes?" He nods. "Alright, then when your abilities become public knowledge I will make the necessary arrangements for your clan status and get the ball rolling on taking your proper name. Are you still waiting to read their scrolls?" After a hesitant moment he nodded, averting his eyes. "Why yeah, I don't know why, but I'm nervous as all hell. I at least want to become a genin proper, maybe then I'll think I don't know, earned it." Sarutobi rose easily from his seat and clapped the teen on his shoulder. "Trust me, Naruto, they couldn't be more proud." Naruto gave him a weak smile, his eyes shining with unshed tears as he took comfort in his grandfather's presence, Shiori opting to stay quiet in order to give them their time. After taking a few moments to compose himself, he gave the old man one more smile and headed for the academy. It was going to be an interesting day, to say the least. Shino's life was a unique balance between simple and complex. His life at home was complex as he had to learn many unique chakra control exercises in order to ensure his hive would be properly fed and yet keep them from draining him dry and ultimately killing him. His time at school was simple, as most considered him to be creepy or gross, so they would leave him alone so that he could focus on his exercises even while his insects gathered the information he needed to pass his tests. It was when it would come to the bug clones or sending swarms out that he could become himself again, with the beetles gone and the chakra drain shunted to others or his painted targets their focus would be shifted, letting him relax. That's where the high collar came into play, covering his relieved expression and drooping eyes, as he would let out an almost silent sigh, only Hinata seeming to be the one to catch his discomfort, offering a reassuring squeeze to his elbow or a small smile. However, for the first time in his life, he was at a loss. There, walking into the classroom, was Naruto Uzumaki. For some reason, he was under a hinge, with his chakra levels peaking at a level that had him forcing his insects to stay within him. It made no sense, Naruto had always had a lot of chakra, it was a small blessing for him to let many of his bugs out to snack on Naruto towards the end of the day, as the teen never seemed to run out of energy. He wasn't a fool, he knew he could get in trouble for doing this, but it was never many, and never enough to be noticed, though some part of him believed that Naruto knew what he had been doing to him for the last year he couldn't be certain. The way that he would, as he left the classroom, turn and give him something of a knowing look. From a prankster like Naruto, it was a look you didn't want to be on the receiving end of. Naruto moved further into the classroom to sit at the top row, opposite of the classroom from where Shino was sitting and plopped down before leaning back in a chair and propping his feet up on the desk. Shino had decided to put off the questions and the mussing for at least their lunch hour and turned his attention inward, focusing on shifting the chakra levels throughout his body so that he could keep the hive moving, testing their reaction times within his own body. Slowly the re-aiming students began to trickle in, the standard conversations and muffled excitement climbing as the room filled, the graduates from the previous month all appearing in various states, some having changed their wardrobes or gotten shiny new gear from family members or cans. A few were showing off new swords, and one of Sasuke's fangirls, Wanami Murasaki, had a long chain wrapped around her petite form in a provocative manner, the chain ending in blade, showing it to be a kusarigama. Shino knew for a fact that the girl had never even touched such a thing before today, her sensei was going to be pissed. The stoic young man willed his bugs to buzz slightly to cover up his chuckle. Finally the final two of the day decided to make themselves known, Sakura and Ino bursting into the room simultaneously and warping the from slightly "I'm first. In your dreams forehead. True love conquers all." Biba was currently doing his best to cover his ears as the girl's squabble only grew in pitch, making the boy curse his heightened senses. Chaoji, for once, didn't have a bag of chips and instead was looking rather nervous as he cast half glances to his currently sleeping friend. Shino also made note that Hinata had been looking at Naruto once more, however, rather than the standard blush she was known to sport, he was surprised to see her bloodline activated even as she was intensely focused on the blonde. Shino was about to put the odd occurrence out of his mind when several of his bugs started to buzz angrily at him. Shino, unknown to most of the class, tensed so harshly that he felt a sudden pulled muscle in his back even as he swiveled to look at Naruto. There, with his head down on crossed arms was the blonde and currently resting on the back of his hand was what appeared to be a wasp as long as his index finger. The blonde didn't seem to be alarmed, if anything he seemed bored as he was almost nose to mandible with the insect as they seemed to just be studying one another, the shockingly large hunter idly buzzing its wings a few times before it crawled over Naruto's hands a few times before disappearing under his sleeve. Only one thought went through Shino's mind at that moment. Kamizuru. The assignments went largely without incident, save for the apparent elation and subsequent crushed spirits of Naruto and Sakura when they found out they were teamed with the Uchiha. Naruto had been debating on ambushing Sasuke as part of a brilliant plan to find out Sakura's true feelings about himself when he was pulled suddenly into an ally to find him pressed against the bricks with a blade at his neck. The blonde's head was spinning and very nearly let his hinge fall as he came face to face with a set of dangerously glinting glasses. "Who are you? Who sent you?" Naruto gaped slightly at Shino as he glanced at the kunai, "Isn't that my line? Are you a member of the Kamizuru clan?" "The who?" The blade pressed further into his throat. "Don't play the fool with me, Uzumaki. I saw your insect." Naruto's eyes widened slightly as inside him Shiori was cursing up a storm, a strange thing for such a, normally demure woman. "Shino, I don't know who those Kamizuru people are, but I can guarantee you that I am not one of them." The blade eased slightly as the glare faded from his glasses, letting Naruto look into rather confused eyes. "Explain." Naruto let out a sigh as he brought up one finger to push the blade away. "I'll tell you, but not here, let's go to one of the training grounds." The coat-clad boy watched him for a moment before nodding and stepping back, the pair heading towards the closest grounds. Unknown to Shino, Naruto made a discreet hand sign, and at once a copy of himself shot off across the rooftops, intent on finding his quarry. Sasuke. The time in the clearing was a rather enlightening one for Naruto. Apparently Shino had been more than a little impressed that Naruto had developed a bloodline that allowed him to create insects of pure chakra. Naruto, in exchange for Shino keeping his secret, agreed to allow his beetles to feed off of the wasps after a mutually agreed series of sparring sessions. Naruto knew that he would be able to learn quite a bit about how his hive would behave, while Shino would be able to train physically alongside Naruto without fear of running out of chakra. It was a beautiful arrangement, both get stronger, both help one another, both will, hopefully, live to see 20. Upon returning to the academy, Naruto glanced into the classroom to see his clone waiting in his previous seat and with a quick Kawarimi dispelled the doppelganger. And immediately regretted it. To those that would care to look to the back of the classroom, they would have seen Naruto's normally irremovable smile fade to a haunted look bereft of happiness. Inside, Shiori was simply shocked at what she had heard and seen, Sakura insulting him because he didn't have any parents. Sasuke taking up for him. It was like some kind of bizarre world. Finally snapping out of her stupor, she pulled her host into his mind and moved as close to the bars as she could, taking the boy into her arms. It's not true, is it, Shiori-chan? She didn't really say all that, did she? She ran a hand gently down his features to cup his cheek, absently wiping at a tear he didn't know he had shed. I tried to warn you last night, dear one, she wasn't a good person. She felt her heart break as the boy gave a strangled sob, curling into her embrace as close as he could, a part of him cursing the bars with a passion. Shino was the only one that seemed to notice the fact that the blonde had his head hidden into the crook of his elbow, his head down on the desk as he shuddered now and again. Watching Naruto for several moments, he placed a hand on his shoulder, making the boy jerk upright suddenly as slightly puffy eyes. What is it, Shino-san? Are our senseis here yet? And no, not yet. It was the first time in the class's history that they had heard the stoic boy stutter. Oh, then what's up? Are you alright, Uzumaki-san? Unseen to those around the Aburum, he frowned as a clearly fake grin came over Naruto's features. Just from their short lunchtime conversation, he knew that Naruto had been faking a great many things in all the time he knew him. Of course, Shino. I'm great, believe it. He gave a slight nod before returning to his seat, the attention of the class rapidly dwindling, even as a few sets of eyes were now studying the pair. One set belonging to a pale blonde, one to a boy normally asleep, and one a boy whose normal vocabulary was HRN. As the last of the students entered the room, many were a bit surprised to see several men and women in various vests coming in to claim their teams. It was the last pair, however, that really caught Naruto's attention. The first was well known to him, Asuma Sarutobi, the Hokage's son, who quickly called out for Team 10 and left. However, it was the woman that had followed him and that caught many an eye. She was a beauty to be sure, long raven hair that was slightly mused, giving her a just woke up look, but her bright crimson eyes spoke otherwise, the clear orbs scanning the room and taking in the last 6 students in the room. I am Kurana Yuhi, teammate, you're with me. However, she was mildly surprised to see 4 people stand though, and the resulting sets of eyes that turned on the blonde. You. She arched an eyebrow, do I know you? The look of fury on the blonde's face was more than a little shocking to those in the room, they had never seen Naruto get this mad before. You sure as fuck don't. And that's the problem. Kurenai let out a mildly annoyed huff as she tucked an errant strand of hair behind her ear. Look kid, I'm not the kind to go for younger men, so why don't you have a seat? If anything, his rage only grew. Fuck that lady, I don't know anyone that would stoop to someone like you. Now there were 2 angry people in the room and 5 whose jaws were hanging limply. What are you talking about, you brat? I could get any man I wanted to. Now it was his turn to snort. Couldn't get me, bitch. What the hell is your name, punk? Naruto Uzumaki. That gave her pause. This was the kid that Anko had met. Couldn't be, she made him sound like the nicest guy in the world. And again, this was Anko. So you're supposed to be little liar that tricked Anko. Lady, his voice was deathly quiet, only the silence in the room allowed anyone to hear his words at all. You don't know a damn thing about me, and I'm the liar. It was because of you that Anko-chan started hating me, that she thought I lied to her. If it weren't for Iruka-sensei she still would. Take your students and get the hell out of here. If I see you again today, I won't be held responsible for what I do. Are you threatening me, Jenin? He sent a smirk her way, his eyes cold as they bore into her own. No, I'm just a civilian, warning a frigid bitch away from a threat to her health. Her own scowl turned her once lovely features to mask of ugliness. For that, you're going on report, Uzumaki. Good luck with that. He dropped back into his seat with a huff, his scowl never leaving, even as something of a cocky smirk formed on his lips. He let his eyes track her until the group left, Hinata and Shino sending him odd looks, even as Kiba was looking more than a little pissed. As he tried to calm himself, his vision was suddenly filled with pink, an angry pink. What the hell do you think you're doing, you baka? You got in trouble and we haven't even gotten our teacher yet. Sakura, you don't know anything about the situation, so go sit down with your little boy toy and leave me alone. Sasuke's eyes were as wide as saucers as he saw the dope of their class not only tell off a jonin, but now try and put his own crush in her place. What the hell is going on today? First he ties me up to take my place for some reason, then he acts like this. Did he hear her earlier? And who is Anko? The flush of anger filled her cheeks as she took a step back in shock. What did you just say to me? This time a look that made her flinch was leveled on her. Sorry, guess not having any parents was a bad influence on me. Sasuke flinched even as Sakura's eyes widened before she had to look anywhere except Naruto. Save it, I don't care anymore. Sasuke, for what it's worth, thanks. Before the raven-haired teen could answer, the door to the classroom opened once more, revealing a masked man with gravity-defying hair. Well, I'd have to say my first impression of you all is you're going to be a headache. Meet me on the "Here will be fine, Kakashi-kun." The masked jonin stiffened slightly as he looked over his shoulder to see the Hokage, in full regalia, standing there with a small smile. Hokage-sama, is there something I can help you with? I know I was a little late, but the elderly leader waved him off with a smile. Now, none of that. There's just something concerning Naruto that we're going to have to go over away from prying eyes, and these rooms are shielded well enough to ensure our security. One of the things Kakashi hated the most was not knowing what someone had planned for him, even his boss especially his boss. "Oh course sir, after you." The silver-haired jonin snapped his book open as the duo moved into the room. "Hey old man, I've got to warn you now, Kurenai Mesu will be paying you a visit later. Think she can write me up for telling her off?" Sarutobi let out something of a tired sigh. "And what brought this on? You know what happened with Anko-chan and me, yeah? I yelled at her for it, she called me a liar, so I yelled more." The Hokage pulled his hat off and rubbed his scalp in annoyance. "I see very well, I'll handle it. Now, are you ready for this?" Naruto, knowing when to play a part when he needed to, cast somewhat nervous eyes to the others in the room. "Are you sure we have to do this, Jai? I can keep this up for days." Sarutobi hid his own smirk. Now, you can't have secrets on your team, Naruto, it's only a little hint. Be one that will melt at least 2 minds when we do this." The elderly leader moved towards the steps even as Naruto moved down. "Anyone else have any illusions active that I should be aware of? There can be no secrets on the team if you are going to work together properly." The 2 young teens and silver-haired teacher exchanged looks before shaking their heads. No time like the present, old man. The pair exchanged an unseen smirk as the Hokage put 2 fingers on Naruto's forehead, even as he let his hive manifest under his clothing, making the wasps appear and vanish to create a smokescreen as he formed a hidden ram hand sign and began to pulse his chakra wildly. The 3 onlookers had their jaws handing limply as they felt the sheer power coming from the dead last. Even as the smoke enveloped the duo, Kakashi was about to leap into the veil, fearing for his leader, when a great whirlwind kicked up around the pair, dispersing the smoke and revealing a sight that had Kakashi's mask almost falling off. His jaw had dropped so low, his covered eye almost visible even with his headband still in place. "Sensei?" "Not quite, Kakashi-sensei."